Welcome to January 15th City Council meeting. And let's have roll call, please.
Mayor Present. Deputy Mayor Dexter. Here. Councilmember French.
Here.
Councilmember King. Here. Councilmember Meredith.
Here.
Councilmember Moran.
Here.
Councilmember Sherman Warren.
Here.
Manager West.
Present.
Attorney Wood.
Here.
Thank you. So as we're going to move on to the public comment. Oh, no, sorry, pledge of allegiance. So please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So now on to the public comment period. We've got some folks signed up, so please keep your comments to 3 minutes. When you get onto the podium, please state your name and whether you live in the city or not. Okay, and the first person on there is Hillary Powers.
Hi everybody, my name is Hillary Powers, and yes, I'm a member of Port Angeles. I'm here today with a few of my students. I'm an educator, and we are going to commemorate Martin Luther King Jr. So I'm going to go with something that I read, or that I wrote, and I'm going to do my best to read this and get through it. So here goes. I have a dream. It wakes me from my sleep. A distant whisper, a close scream. It echoes in my heart. It ripples through time. It falls with my tears. It quiets all my fears. It's breaking the shackles and removing the chains. It's calling out and releasing all pain. Ancestral slaves, they sing for freedom. Their pain will not be taken in vain. Pain is not for the dead, it's here for the living. Pain doesn't stop us, it only stokes the fire. Let it burn a light that takes us higher. I have a dream, it's not meant to stay buried. This dream is alive, it's up to us to carry. It's about will, something we all get to claim. Will I stand up for justice? Will I fight for peace? Will I demand freedom? Will I walk with them in the streets? These questions leave us with action. Our words mean nothing unless we start backing. So I must ask myself, am I living what I believe? Am I practicing what I preach? Every day I must challenge myself to walk the walk. I must look into my eyes and stop believing the lies. Honor the cries and begin to realize. Get to know not just your scars, but scars of another. Scars are emblems, tattoos of resilience. They prove we can fight and that we were made to survive. Rewind time, watch the scars become wounds. Let them open, blood trickling down, and it becomes a witness. Honor your brothers and sisters. Learn about their battles. Listen to their stories. No matter your color, your blood is always red. Let it drip on your soul. Let it wash your sins. Let it flow down the river. It's never too late to begin. Actions over words is the only way. Love has no language. It's much, much bigger. Love has no ending, so that no mark can stop it. It's beyond our understanding, so why even question it? Exclaim in action and capitalize compassion. Love breathes and it thrives and beats to a rhythm. Put your hand on your chest and listen to the music. There's something deeper than all of us know. It's time to shut up and it's time to show. I have a dream was stated by a king. People spit and hit and he stood firmly, seeking into concrete, embodying nonviolence, holding hands with his brothers of all different colors. His footprints outlasting all kinds of weather. It's easy to love the lovable. The true test is loving the hateful. King showed us that it's possible. Begin again every day. Respect the law, but challenge it fiercely. As King said, never forget that what Hitler did was legal. The law of the land sometimes has a different plan. The law of the soul never oppresses. It only knows love that stands for freedom. It's the only foundation for a united kingdom. I don't have to be a king to have a dream. I can start today and achieve new heights. All I need to do is go towards the light. Dreams rise with the sun and never burn out. Freedom will ring if it's the last thing I shout.
Thank you so much. You're welcome. Just spoke so everybody knows today is actually Martin Luther King's birthday. So next is Lee White.
I'm Patty, and I am from Breakfast. Born into a world that already hated him, not for his actions, but for his skin. Told at 6 years old he could not play with the white kids, he was taught to obey. At 12 years old, he wanted to die. With no hope left, he attempted suicide. Seeing such treatment that today was as baffled. With each day came a new battle. No longer a valued member of society, he lived in a world with no sense of propriety. Yet still he began a revolution in 1954, one unlike any they had seen before, because this one was led in love. This was one they could be proud of. Boycotts and protests took place to prove that they were human no matter their race. Years and years they spent fighting, but the police just kept firing. They could not see they only wanted peace. Still hand in hand they marched the streets. We've come so far since these times, since the days they marched with picket signs. But we can't forget that what we have today was once just the dream of MLK. Thank you.
Annabelle Waldron.
Hi, I'm Annabelle. I live in town. I tried writing this from what I believe Martin Luther King would have thought of how we treat people today. 60 years, nothing's changed. No rules, one rule, the white rule, and that's not how it should be. Didn't you listen to me? Pull together to build this house that is our country. Stop redlining before we stop rioting. For 100 years we've been fighting to end segregation, be a stronger nation. The Civil War ended slavery, nothing more. Not racism. That's why America is my home and your kingdom. Tell me, past my skin, what differences do you see other than I'm more likely to struggle with poverty? Is the blood in your veins more red than the blood that runs through me? One day this fight will run out of time. You teach your kids there is a difference, so our kids have to remain vigilant, but there shouldn't be a difference. Your kids, our kids, this country's kids are one and the same, no difference. It'll take strength, but we can pull through it without our fists. Listen to our words so they won't have to hit. I'm only one man with two hands, so I'm asking for your help, because if we're going to end this, we need to be all in. Give the voiceless voices and begin. Start changing the statistics, look past the skin, pigmentation of segregation, past skin color to the content of my character, beyond my speech pattern down to my brain where it matters. I love this country, but not what it stands for. Equality is imaginary, give me equity. For the new generation, so they don't have to fight our war. Racism doesn't start with hate, it starts with judgment. We need to fight the prejudice. One speech won't fix it, so we'll have to speak a million to make them listen. Our words are stronger than any bullet they could fire. A house undivided will fall apart. I'm proud where I come from, but not how you react to it. So we need to start changing or face the rebellion.
Russell Bowers.
Hello, my name is Russell Bowers, and I live in Peninsula. Unity. We're all one and the same. Push beyond the frame. Our bond is stronger than chain. It's much more than the game. Time to stand together and spark the flame. It's inclusion. This ideal forms mass confusion. When others are different, we jump to conclusion, but why do so? We're all just human. Time to spice things up and add some human. What are we doing? We should be hunting exclusion. We're all just one piece to the puzzle. Disregard the past trouble. Don't let your views cause trouble. Pop the forsaken bubble that creates cavities in our social structure. Come together for the Rough Rider culture. Like Martin Luther King Jr., I've decided to seek to love. Hate is too great a burden to bear. When you're planted that cherishes listen, we're all people. Care about one another. Have some faith. Take the first step even if you can't see, because if you don't, you'll never know what life can be. I have a dream that humanity can truly feel free, not tied down by 1, 2, and 3. That it can be a disaster. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Climb the ladder to the top. Don't look down or stop. It's pointless. Disjoint disappear or just reappear. Our reasoning is crystal clear. Standing together, we'll create bonds that are hard to sever. Live, grow, and love, and be you forever. We lack acceptance. Please accept us. We're all the same in essence. Just savor every sentence. There's no need for a skeptic. Everyday life can be hectic. Just take that being neglected. When it comes to race, people get spat in the face. It's a constant chase, but when you understand colors, colored hygiene, and races have more melanin, my friend, their vision will be its end. Stand up if you're with me. It's a slippery slope, where we can use each other to cope. Time to change the scope. Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Let you see through their eyes, and maybe it'll be the demise of the shade you go hide behind. There's no rewind button. There's no slow cast. What we do and say won't affect the past. It'll work the here and now. So please take this vow, be positive and loud in the world. The results you'll see will be profound. Now stand together and embrace the sound of unity. This is not the place for scrutiny. We should all meld together fluently. There is no pseudo me. This is what society is doing to me. We have 2 eyes, but are too blind to see. Don't care enough to fix the issue. It's real talk, don't crack piece of tissue. If you need someone, I'm with you. Life is a blessing. At times it can be testing, but don't waste what you have resting on your shoulders. Without warmth, our lives would be colder. In the time it took me to write this, I've gotten older. I knew this girl, and her parents always told her to be herself. That young girl's name was Danielle. One day she came to school for show and tell, and those second grade kids put her through hell. But what she brought to the stage was the bell in the story. It was the last thing her mother gave her before she was eternally snoring. The story of our lives is far from boring. Stop judging others unless you know the full tale. The sad wear smile in place of armor like chainmail. If you really try, you can see behind the veil. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much. Jan?
I am a resident of Port Angeles. I live near Lions Park, very close to it. In the early hours of the morning, I heard chainsaws and dark. It was heartbreaking to see that happen. It had to be cut down. It was a tribute to the power of protest that the company that originally got the contract to kill the tree backed down because of public outrage and the bad PR that would result. I support. No, I was upset. There was no notice. And also wondered about why there was the ignoring of the arborist views that the tree that was named Hope was healthy and could be saved. And I thought it seems that the one complaint of the woman with a road running near her driveway, with the tree being close to her driveway and not being able to use it, that was the big consideration when she wanted. I was amazed at the city council claiming that one of the local Native American tribes would take the poor tree's carcass and carve a totem pole. I suspect no tribe would take it. As I recall, tribes did not kill for the sake of convenience.
Could you state your name, please?
My name is Jan Wheeler.
Jane Wheeler? Okay, thank you. Next, I have Ray. So please state your name and whether you're a resident of Port Angeles.
All right, hello everybody. My name is Raymond Bolby. I am, in fact, a resident of Port Angeles, and I am also a neighbor. My house is directly adjacent to Lions Park. And my primary concern, while I do share with members of the community in the sadness to see this tree be felled, my primary concern that I wanted to address is the nature of public safety. As a person that's worked as a safety lead for large construction firms, I found that it is absolutely necessary to have delineation and signage to inform people of any potential hazards that may be present at any construction site. It's very important that people are notified and well informed to preserve their security. For example, if somebody had cut off a bridge and there was no signage suggesting that this bridge had been cut off and somebody walked to their death because they were ignorant of the fall hazard, that would be a very serious concern for any construction firm that had committed that act without the signage. I imagine that it would lead to a very large lawsuit. So to be perfectly candid, I believe that the lack of any sort of signage or delineation is exactly what led to the possibility of an arrest inside the park in the first place. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Tyson.
Hello, my name is Tyson Mink. Live outside of Port Angeles. Out of respect to our community, could you please close all computers and all cell phones? Mr. Delicott? Point 1, the Sequoia has lived 42 years old, making its planting date 1976. Point 2, Washington for Evergreen, a bicentennial coalition, donated trees to the city of Port Angeles to be planted in various parks, including Lions Park, in 1976. Point 3, this was no way to treat a gift. Point 4, there were no park closed signs present on the morning of January 3rd posted at Lions Park. Point 5, please watch the video of Devon Gray's arrest to see what happened. Point 6, gloating can take many forms. The way it was betrayed by city workers on January 3rd took the form of not allowing the community to mourn the loss of this tree. A chainsaw on the stump, some 15 minutes after the tree was felled, is intentional gloating, antagonizing, and shows disrespect to both the tree and the citizens of our city. Point 7, if your loved one was killed, should you be allowed the space to grieve? Point 8, I stand in support of Gray. She is a longtime advocate of peace in our community. She has championed for the following causes. She has championed for the Lions Park's trees. She has championed for no fluoride in the water. She has championed to end the Iraq War and was arrested for walking the crosswalk in front of Safeway. She has also championed for the suicide barriers on 8th Street Bridge, which we so desperately needed, and I'm proud of our city for putting there. I appreciate that. Point 9. Her charges should be dropped immediately. They are disrespectful to her activism, to her career as an activist. Point 10, you make $149,000, Mr. Mason West. To many, to regard cutting of a landmark tree in our community for one homeowner's view is not environmental or economic development. It is a community travesty. Your lack of respect for the community who pose positive solutions is a stain on the grass of Lions Park.
I just want to clarify, I'm simply taking notes of what people say on my computer. That's what I'm typing about.
Linda Herring, 3 Cobbles, downtown PA. Once Yvonne and her friends entered the park and saw the tree on the ground, everyone should have left them alone to say goodbye to hope. Yvonne was experiencing shock, stress, grief, and anger. Taking her to jail did not help any of these things. When she realized the battle had been lost, it was too much for her. But was she treated with respect? No. Was Hope treated with respect? No. And the picture in the paper was like a slap in our faces. And we're not all tree huggers and environmental battles. If PA keeps on chopping down its trees downtown Seattle will have more trees than Port Angeles. And as for the situation downtown, it's not gotten any better. And did I think it would? Nope. And next time I'm here, the walk will come to you. I have pictures that you won't want to see.
Elizabeth Dunn.
Elizabeth Dunn, Port Angeles, Washington. I'm going to start with one of my favorite MLK quotes. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. I submit that killing the Sequoia tree, that by killing the Sequoia tree, the city thought that it could get rid of the tension, but what we're seeking is justice. I'm not going to repeat all the facts of what happened on January 3rd, because if you read the paper and listened to public comments, then you should be informed. And if you're sitting here and you're an elected representative and you're getting paid by our taxpayer dollars, then you should be informed. At some point during this meeting, City Manager West, if he so chooses, will speak about the felling of the Sequoia and the events that happened in Lions Park on January 3rd. And he will likely try to explain why that's what he had to do, and that's what he thought was in the public's best interest. That is simply not true. The only thing City Manager West should be saying is that he apologizes and that the situation was not handled the right way. The city has every opportunity to get it right this time. Save Our Sequoia offered to adopt the tree and steward it at no cost to the city in accordance with the tree management plan recommended by one of the best arborists in the state. There is no logical reason to cut it down. So what we're left with looks very much like a reactionary power play. We cannot continue to accept the "we'll get it right next time." The city has disrespected community, public safety, trees, and our public parks, with emphasis on public and free speech. The tree itself is worthy, but this is more than about the tree. It's about finding cooperative solutions with the community. It's about people standing up and feeling like they have a voice. It's about recognizing that the public parks are the people's parks. It's about seeing that change starts with the single act of saving a tree. It's about valuing your elders, and it's about creating good examples for future actions. The bigger picture is how we treat our natural environment and how we treat each other. Do we say this big beautiful tree is in the wrong place? Do we say this homeless person sleeping under a tree is in the wrong place? Do we say you don't have a voice because you can't talk or because you're marginalized from mainstream society? So it's not about standing up for trees or standing up for people. It's not a choice between those two. It's about standing up for both. And it's about standing up for what is just. And in the name of that, Save Our Sequoia has organized an event in celebration of MLK in Lions Park. And that event will bring together community members and social environmental justice movements on January 21st from noon to 1:30. We hope this will be the first annual Lions Park MLK event to celebrate our civil rights and environmental justice.
Yeah, but I can't go to that. You know, you're in the park. The city says I can't go into Lions Park now.
Devon, if you could speak to the mic so it can be recorded, we'd really appreciate it.
I think everybody can hear me fine, Sissy.
Right. And
I
it's-
was working on a eulogy, but the corpse of my beloved is still outside. I can see her from my garden, Our Lady Guadalupe Garden Gifts. You made your point, Nathan. You came in my neighborhood, you destroyed the tree, and you left the corpse. All right. The eulogy I'm working on involves the little birds that you killed, all the bees, the bats, the spiders. My friend Lydia was there after she was felled. She said all the little birds were just frantic. All the spiders were jumping around in a frenzy like you would care. I believe that trees have an alienable right, like Abraham Lincoln said for the Sequoia in California. He already made that like a legal landmark for environment, for trees. I was on that bogus committee you created, the Tree Advisory Council, and we actually selected a significant heritage historical tree for Port Angeles. And what does Port Angeles do? Cut her down, right away. None of that, not in our town. I'm just glad it's the last time I have to be here.
My name is Jasmine Hunt. I live in Port Angeles, a couple blocks from Lions Park. I don't really want to be here.
I'm in Czar's store just earlier today, and Nathan West is in line right behind me, and he says, "How are you doing? I'm sorry for your loss." And I'm like, yeah. It's really sad, you know. I actually like most people here, you know. I actually think Nathan's kind of cute. But we need to grieve as a community. I'm crying all the time now. This is probably the most tears I've had since I was beat with a baseball bat. I say bullies, arrogance, assault, abuse, you should be ashamed. I feel the assault, the murder, the rape tear through my soul every day since. Disgusted at city manager that lies and puts his personal agenda above the citizens. At a city council that just doesn't get it. The trees matter, that this tree mattered. I see community depression. People walk by the park hanging their heads in sorrow or shame. The remains of the Sequoia carcass continue to abuse us and our senses. It's like a statement from the city. See, this is what happens if you fight us. Devon told Nathan to stay out of our neighborhood and away from the Sequoia. Now Nathan uses the court to prohibit Devon from Lions Park, attempting to make it permanent. I don't see this as just in any way. Nathan's or the city or the court, I believe, is violating Devon's constitutional rights of freedom of religion and freedom from cruel and unusual punishment, preventing her from mourning this loss. The back of our business card says, "Holy Mary, Our Lady Guadalupe, you hold us in the crossing of your arms, you carry us in the fold of your mantle, we stand in the shadow of your protection. You are our living tree, queen of the forest, you teach us peace and rest." The paper quote that Devon received spiritual nourishment from trees and that the forest was her cathedral. The Sequoia was her temple and it was desecrated. I'm really tired of coming here with all this silly dribble, patting yourselves on the back, all these little proclamations and all this kind of silly baloney. And I just don't understand. What happened to things? Sissy, I remember. Didn't you remember the city, Nathan, Sherry, cheating us on the biomass? Especially the second biomass public hearing? How could you burn the spirit of those that helped you? And I don't want any justification or wrong tree, wrong place. If I have to hear Nathan say how fair this process has been, or wrong tree, wrong place one more time, I will have to scream. Our souls have been charred by the abuse of the city. We have no faith in you or city staff to be ethical and moral in the city's treatment of its citizens. So I turn away from you in disgust.
Wayne Kraut?
Good evening, I'm Wayne Kraut. I live in Port Angeles, 1826 West 4th Street. I'm here this evening to make the City Council and the public aware that in view of the suffering that's being imposed on our federal employees during this shutdown, we have formed a local group called the Caring Neighbors of Port Angeles that's attempting to coordinate with the Coast Guard, the Border Patrol, and the other affected federal agencies to provide support for the employees who've been placed in a position of strain, not due to their own causes. And what we're attempting to do is to collect gift cards and things that can be utilized by the agencies to help the people who need support, and to coordinate with the other agencies who are coming forward with programs to try and fill in some of the gaps. Hopefully this will all go away shortly, but if it doesn't, we would like Port Angeles to be known as a city that stands behind its people. Because when you get to the bottom line of this, these are our employees. They work for us. And if we stand by and let them be abused and held hostage without providing the assistance to them, we have done wrong. And what we'd like to do is encourage the public to get some gift cards, get some support services that you're able to provide or coordinate with, and coordinate with the Coast Guard. We work with the Chief Petty Officers Association because they know who the people are that are in the most need. We work with the Border Patrol and with the National Parks to try and figure out if there's any way we can be of assistance to them. But it's a chance, you can follow our information on the Pawa site, or we've also developed our own website called the Caring Neighbors of Port Angeles. We simply like to encourage everyone to step forward and in this time of need, do what we can to help those who come forward quite often when we need things. The Coast Guard always sends a delegation if there's a community project going on. They always step forward when we need their assistance. And now's the time for us to stand up as good neighbors and stand up for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Just checking, that's the Caring Neighbors of PA on the website?
Yes, we've developed our website. Roxy Bailey has coordinated it. We have about 24 members now.
Wonderful, thank you so much for that. Justin Vandevoli? Sorry.
Hello, I'm Justin Vandevoli, Port Angeles resident. And I'm here today about the method in which the Sequoia Line Street Park was removed. I was here serving teeth for the council meeting in which we attempted to raise awareness about the Sequoia, the new report that had been created by board certified master arborist Kate Bigelow that offered alternative management solutions in hopes that city staff or council would take that into account in their management of the tree. I was sad to hear on the day of its removal that it was being cut down in the wee hours of the morning without proper notice to residents living next to it. There are signs in the park, which when I'm describing, so I'm an environmental consultant, so when I'm describing to clients, a process where there's a lack of enforcement in the city, and contractors can willy-nilly go into critical areas and remove trees without following our procedure. It's generally about contractors who are just working on the back of the truck with a chainsaw, not usually about a city and how it manages its resources. The actions that the city took there were, it was more of a stunt than anything else. And I'd like to follow up with it. Before the tree was removed, the Parks Department had a tree removal policy created in which it stated that there would be replantings for trees removed when possible. Lions Park seems to be a great place where that would be possible, given that it is open, mostly lawn. It'd be encouraging to see the city follow through on its own policies and to either have a plan in place for that planting, which should usually be done before the trees are moved, or at least have a plan for how that removal is going to take place with proper notice, or what's going to be done with that tree resource after removal, as opposed to leaving the park without a clear decision in mind how that's going to be utilized. And in general, it's great to see the city following best available science, which would have been that report that was created beforehand, but that is no longer the case. At least following best management practices, and at the very least following its own policies. And so I encourage the city to follow that tree removal policy, and I had previously written city staff and council with some recommendations for that tree removal policy that could help clarify it and help avoid situations like this, in which you have so many citizens coming in to express their disappointment, concern, and their grief over it. And avoiding that in the first place by having transparency and by having clear policies that outline how and what is going to be followed, and so that you don't have to feel blindsided in a case like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Two more people on the list, and then we're going to have to move on to our public hearing. That there is also another public
I'm going to extend the public comment period so that everyone who can speak now has the ability to speak.
Okay, like I said, we've got 2 more folks on the list, so I was going to try to get through this list here. So, Melissa Missinell.
My name is Melissa Missinell. I'm a resident of Port Angeles. My family and I moved to Port Angeles 4 years ago, drawn in by its natural beauty, its sense of community, and the hope that we would actually have a voice here. At the December 18th council meeting, you heard from many citizens who came with both anecdotes and facts about the Lions Park Sequoia. I trusted that the council and city staff would take in this new information that was given to them, not just at the meeting, but through emails prior and meetings with arborists, and community members. And they would take that new information and reevaluate, hearing the will of the community. But as it turns out, this town is suffering from the same problems we're having on a national level. Facts and logic are disregarded in favor of stubbornness, ignorance, and selfishness. There's always an agenda going on. I'm disappointed that you did not hear our voices, perhaps writing all of us off as eccentric tree huggers. But I'm here to tell you that we're not just that. We're scientists, hikers, we're community members, we're nature lovers, volunteers, and most importantly, voters. And I just want to say that we will remember that when we're at the polls and just in the future. Thank you.
Lydia Course.
Okay, I'm Lydia Corris. I'm a resident of Port Angeles. I really wasn't expecting to come here today. I haven't written anything, so I'm just going to throw this out there. So I do want to say I'm disappointed in the way that things were handled with the Sequoia. I feel like I gave some really good ideas and solutions, and along with other arborists, professional arborists, and that wasn't taken into consideration. And I just want to throw a little story out there real fast. So I have parents, they live in Slovenia, which is in Europe, it's former Yugoslavia, and I had sent a couple of issues of the Peninsula Daily News and what's going on with the Sequoia tree. And I didn't expect them to have much opinion on it, aside from they were kind of proud of me. Well, actually, to the contrary, they had a ton of opinion on it. They said that something very similar, actually the exact same thing happened in their city. They live in a city called Pchoy. And in that city there was 2 giant trees as old as the town, as old as Pchoy has been. And there was thousands of people protesting to save these 2 trees. People crying, praying, falling down, everything. And the city still cut the 2 trees that were in the middle of the city and now refuse to replant. And my parents said that they are worried about they're worried about, the ecosystem, and that they're proud of me for being an activist and to worrying about the greenhouse effect and global warming, and that they're concerned. Now, these are people that grew up and lived in the time of Adolf Hitler, believe it or not, and even though they're Catholic and they did not have to go to the Jewish camps, they still lived in fear. Well, today, they live in a new fear, global warming. And I wish and I hope and pray that we now see that this is a global problem, like they said. This is bigger than us, and that we make a difference. We need to make a stand here in Port Angeles, the city of trees. Thank you very much.
All right, council, so we've gotten to the end of the list. How do you want to proceed forward? Do we want to, at this point, move on to the public hearing? Do we want to continue to open it up for the rest, or if there's anybody else? But I know that we have a public hearing at 6:30, that folks are also here for that.
I could be wrong, but I just wanted to ask, I suppose, but it seems that most of the people who signed up are here. Some people have come in late, but I wonder if they're here for the public hearing.
Right, so that's the reason I want to be respectful and open up to council so that we hear opinions. Yes?
No, I would encourage us to move on to the public hearing session. I would point out that we do have a second public comment session, and people who are interested can stick around for that, but we need to get on with the business at hand, please.
Anybody else?
Just ask, who else wants to make a public comment unrelated to the housing policy that we have not yet discussed? So that it's it's just Mr. Austin. It's here for good.
All right, so all right. So
I'm kind of going cold on this because we don't get the newspaper, and so I'm not familiar with the details of the plans that the city council is putting into place. but I'm very encouraged that you are concerned about the problem of multifamily housing, and that you're attentive to that problem, and I'm pleased to hear that. I've had great support from the city staff, I know from you folks too.
Okay, and actually, yeah, if you could just hold on a second, we will, because your comment has to do with our public hearing, we will open the public comment, public hearing so that your statements can go on the record for this public hearing. So if you can introduce yourself with your name and whether you're a resident or Port Angeles.
But you have to open the public hearing first.
Okay, so
I apologize if I was out of order.
it's okay.
I'm sure we can juggle things.
And we will move forward this way, public hearing. So we'll open the public hearing for, regarding the residential target areas as and the ordinance, the resolution is a resolution of the City of Port Angeles, the resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, designating areas of the city as residential target areas for the purpose of establishing multifamily property tax exemption program. So, correct? Okay, thank you. So I officially open this public hearing. All right. So now, Glenn, if we can have your comment again, please. Sorry.
I apologize for the
That's
jeopardy.
okay.
Name?
Leonard Rasmussen, Port Angeles, Washington.
Thank you.
And I wanted to say that I'm pleased that the city council is looking at the issues regarding multifamily housing, and that it is really encouraging to me that this issue has gotten to the attention of the council, and that you're planning on doing something, I'm not sure exactly what, regarding it. And I did want to also comment that in my own efforts to encourage multifamily, I have had terrific support from the city staff, and I do appreciate that support. And I appreciate the assistance that the council gave me by rezoning that I needed a few weeks ago. If I can be of any help to the council or discussion on this, either on the record or off the record, I would be willing to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. John.
I apologize.
John Ralston, city resident of Port Angeles. I was actually hoping to speak, I'm here for the public hearing, but I was hoping that I could make some comments prior to some of the items that are coming up on the agenda tonight, but I guess I'm going to have to wait until afterwards, or I can get them in right now, and you can call me out of order if you wish. Anyway, I want to definitely say I'm in favor of 8414. You know that I've been here for 6 months to a year. I will say that I did not read, I read the proposed ordinance, and I'm not sure if it's verbatim from the RCWs of the state of Washington. I hope it's very close, and if it's not, I guess I wish there was something that was highlighted some of the major differences, but otherwise I'm in favor of this process. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
My name is Steve Hopkins. I'm a resident of the city of Port Angeles and hold a master's degree in urban and regional planning. In looking at the proposed map that was in the council packet, I'm just a little bit concerned that it just blankets the entire city, and the reason for my concern is that it's possible that it would encourage higher density housing in areas where utility and transportation network isn't designed at this point to handle an increase in density. That could potentially result in increased cost to the city, increased transportation trips by automobile, and that could end up having a negative, unexpected impact for the city. I would, however, encourage the city to consider South C Street between 8th and Streets on the west side of town. It already has quite a good deal of high-density housing there. You have 2 food markets, which are very, very important for a walkable, high-density community, for people to have access to food. It has frequent transit service from 5 in the morning until 10 at night. It's a 4-minute transit trip from the corner of 8th and C to downtown Port Angeles. You have a coffee shop, you have restaurants, a neighborhood that's already accustomed to having high-density housing there. And due to the location of Stevens Middle School right nearby, it's very high visibility where people from all over town would have a chance to see what this sort of development would look like and to take advantage of that as well. So there's certainly currently vacant lots in that area as well. We could benefit from some more contiguous sidewalks in that area, and the zoning is right for it. So I'd encourage you to continue to consider the 800 to 1600 block of South C Street.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to the public hearing?
Good evening, my name is Bill Atkinson. I live in the city of Port Angeles. And I read the RCW and looked at the black spots on the page, and there's quite a few exclusionary statements in there as to the applicability, how the taxation is going to work. And my concern is that the city take a serious look at what the cost to the city is going to be for this proposal. For one thing, what can the infrastructure handle it? Can the sewers handle it? And so before you pass an ordinance, I think you need to come forward with an analysis of what this means to us. And also, I would encourage you to consult with other cities that have participated in this and get their feedback as to what their experience specifically, as to what their experience is with the financial side of it. So that's my 2 cents worth. No charge.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this topic?
Hello, good evening. My name is Tara Martin Lopez. I'm a resident of Port Angeles. As an owner of a single-family home in Port Angeles, I want to come out in support of the multifamily dwelling tax exemption, again, in support of. Currently, Port Angeles and Clallam County are in desperate need of affordable housing. According to Harvard University's Joint Center for Housing, just this year, almost half of renters in Clallam County are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. With the decreasing availability of affordable housing, in particular rental housing, in this area, these members of our community, our neighbors, my neighbors, are at risk of homelessness. So we don't want them to become homeless. Therefore, the multifamily dwelling tax exemption can be the first step in avoiding that. Moreover, critics might note that multifamily housing dwellings bring down property values. Studies, again, out of Harvard University show that, reject absolutely that notion, and actually reveal that, quote, working communities with multifamily dwellings actually have higher property values than other types of working communities, unquote. Finally, until recently, I spent my whole entire life living in apartments. My mother was a janitor that spent long hours working as I stayed in our apartment, getting ready for college. And so as she worked hard and we lived in apartments, she was dreaming of one day that I would own my own home.
But that affordable housing assured that I was able to achieve my dreams, and we want that to happen to other members of our community, our neighbors. Therefore, I strongly support the multifamily dwelling tax exemption. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience who would like to speak?
My name is Jane Vanderhoof. I live on 2nd Street in Port Angeles. And I am well aware of the low vacancy rate in this town. And I also have a farm in Joyce where my husband lives, and I live in town. And we have tenants in both places, so we can sort of live in both places and have a house in town and a farm, which we are trying to rehabilitate. And we have new tenants at the farm who are trying to keep the farm going. And I also often think that I should put up tents on my porch or my deck because for homeless people, because I live so close to Sequoia and places that are accessible. And there's vacant lots around, and the vacant lots across the street from me are used as sort of, I don't even know who owns them, but they're kind of used as a dog park, and I think, well, they could be places where a tent could be instead of dogs just using a vacant lot with their owners. And so I'm also in favor of the exemption for multifamily housing because I see that there's a huge need for it in this community, and I think it brings our community standards up to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak to council on this?
Hi, my name is Noreen Hanson. I live here in Port Angeles. I was here in the December council meeting talking about the rentals and the homelessness. And I agree, we need more housing, multiple housing for people. There are many people in this town who are working and who are not able to pay their rent, so they are on the streets, which my boyfriend and I will probably be on the streets before long because landlords are raising rates substantially. They raised our rates from $5.50 to $8.50, and that is not right. I think we need to sit down and think, where's your homeless coming from? It's coming because no one cares enough about their neighbors. You need to stop and think. We all need homes. None of you want to be out on the streets without a home, where there's no electricity, you can't take care of yourself, and you feel like you're worth nothing. All of us wants a place to live. Doesn't have to be a fancy home, just an affordable home where we can all live. I don't understand why there is not an ordinance in Port Angeles or the whole state where there is an ordinance where how much rates would be, how much you can raise rates each year on rentals. It shouldn't be more than half of what you got, which is they have raised more than half of ours. And our landlord is buying properties in this town, and he's raising all the rates like that. So to keep your community, and if we all live together and work together, and if we get more people out of being homeless, your property value, your homes are going to be worth more, you're going to be more proud of your community because we've all worked together. I hope this goes through for everybody because it's important that everybody has a home. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else out there like to comment on this during the public hearing? All right. So let's start a minute. We looked at the eight comments from council. I guess we want to, Allison, or Mr. Ward?
So, coming before you tonight, we have
several items that are all related to the implementation of the multi-unit tax exemption. And of course, this, the underlying purpose of this is to create more multi-unit housing availability, more density in Port Angeles. And also there's a secondary element that provides encouragement for the addition of low-income designated housing as well. So you have just conducted the hearing. The hearing is related to the targeted areas. Well, one of the first things that the council must do is decide on what area or areas in the city will be targeted areas. And if you are ready to have that discussion tonight and to make that designation tonight, then there is a resolution to close the public hearing, discuss that tonight, and if you're ready, make that determination, and then we would have a resolution for you to adopt. Now, we have a draft resolution in the packet, but if you adopt some other combination of targeted areas, we would bring a different resolution back to you at the next meeting with that those areas that you specify. So that's one item for tonight. The second item for tonight is to conduct the first reading on the ordinance. And what the ordinance does is it implements the mechanics to establish the tax exemption. So the tax exemption is actually something that is issued by the city. This is that is authorized under state law. Under state law, it implements the mechanisms that the city will use when the city actually grants this tax exemption. So, but we have to have the designated areas, the targeted areas first. So, those are the items of business for the council tonight on this. If you have any questions, I or others up here will be glad to try to answer them.
Thank you. So council, are there any items, I guess, discussion for the targeted areas?
One observation I think is necessary here. This ordinance and this targeted area does not rezone or change any of those areas. So high density, still high density, and so forth and so on. So the ordinance is not designed to be a rezone tool. It's simply designed for tax benefits. So I think there's a misconception out there that by passing this ordinance, we're rezoning the city into a high density or whatever. But I would like to point out that, and I would appreciate Mike and Lindsay to jump in on this too. This is not a rezone ordinance. This is simply a tax benefit ordinance, and we're spreading that tax benefit across the city, but under no situation or no circumstance are we rezoning the city. So I think that needs to be more clear. What says that?
I think that's a good point, and I agree. I guess I'll jump in and I concur with Councilmember Moran that we have other mechanisms to address the concerns that are valid concerns about creating higher density where we have not planned for higher density. The one place that can be concerned is we as the council, and I think the planning commission as well, deviate from our plans when we receive zoning modification requests from potential developers. So, I mean, that is our responsibility if we go forward with this, to make sure that we keep in mind the comprehensive plan map and the current zoning map for the city, and move forward with intentional development in the places where we should do that. As far as doing the residential target area here for the entire city, I am in support of that because I think it creates administrative efficiency. I think it helps to create this financial incentive throughout the entire city, and we have those other mechanisms in place for addressing the concerns about infrastructure capacity. Thanks.
I agree with that, excuse me, and I also think just from a a user standpoint, it's also easier because there isn't going to be any fuzzy, let's check if that lot actually is in it. I mean, the zoning map will still have to come into play. And thank you for mentioning the comprehensive plan now. But I think having it be the whole city is a good way to move forward to encourage the kind of development that we want, and certainly, as has been expressed multiple times, not just tonight, but over the last year, some development of more housing units.
Anybody else like to chime in?
I think it benefits us to just talk a little bit about how that decision came to pass, because in our last agenda packet, we had a different map that showed an area, that was much smaller of the city, that was basically where we had the central business district at first in front of downtown and most of Lincoln, and then added everything west because that was coincident with the Emerald Coast Opportunity Zone. And so there was a thought that for certain projects, there could be the magic number of credits and incentives to create the development. I think that, for me, part of me does want a smaller, more targeted map, but I think that the concerns that Lindsay shared, we're not in a position necessarily to perfectly identify where we want the perfect development. So I don't want to, say throw away the perfect, or throw the good in search of the perfect. I want to, I don't know the story behind every lot in the city of Port Angeles. I don't know off the top of my head the zoning for every lot in the city of Port Angeles, and so I, am happy to start this program, monitor it for a few years, and then come back and reevaluate to say, okay, did we see some developments engaged in this process? Did we see some tax credits given out? Once we have a better sense of what it's costing us and how much is being used, then we can come back and say 2 or 3 years, let's change the residential target area, because really where we want this multifamily housing kind of development might be downtown or in this area or on C Street, which was a great, I thought everything that Steve said was right on the money as far as that area being right for that type of development. But I don't know the story of every lot, like I said. So, despite some amount of reservations, I do support the target area being the entire city limits.
So I'd like to put in on this one because I totally agree with what Steve was saying, that I do have some concerns about doing the whole city. But at this time, I'm going to try to, because we are relying on the comprehensive plan zoning plan, I am hoping that the planning commission take a really good look at that plan to see if that's exactly the kind of zoning we need. So that's, we've talked about how our comprehensive plan currently shows zoning to be the existing zoning, and that's not what we want. And so I'm hoping it becomes a process of getting that to where we want it so that these tools work well together. But I totally agree with you. I mean, do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the sewer? Do we have the water? And so each project is going to have to be reviewed with those items in mind. And so that's one reason I will support this, because it's a simpler solution than having to identify each one of those areas. But again, I am really hoping that the Planning Commission can take a serious look at our comprehensive plans, future zoning map, and give us what would be a great tool to have supporting this. So,
I just tag on one little thing. I also want to, understand that some of the public does have concerns about those kind of density increases. They do have these concerns, and I don't want to feel like there's some sort of bait and switch happening. I'm personally on the record as saying I think that it would be healthy for our city to be open to small increases in density in most of our residential areas. That's separate from this discussion, and that is a discussion that we'll have at different times, and those will happen slowly and over the course of time. They'll happen sometimes at the Planning Commission, sometimes at the Council, sometimes in response to specific, we've had different quasi-judicial hearings on zoning changes before our Council. So, we are just trying to say we have a need for this type of development. We are going to, let the process go, happen the way it's going to happen. We're not going to blatantly change the zoning map. We do, in the interest of transparency, we do have conditional use permits that are applicable in some zones. So some people might not understand how the zoning works in their specific area, and they might be uncomfortable with some of those changes, but, I just don't want people to feel like there's some sort of bait and switch being proposed here.
Anybody else like to pipe in?
I am in support of this, and I had the same concerns. When I looked at this map, I laughed to myself for a minute, because there's one particular area that I frequent, and I thought, who in the hell would build any type of housing up there? But who am I to say where somebody wants to live? If it's zoned to live there, and there's people that want to live there, you're not going to build something where somebody's not going to want to live, because you're going to have an awfully hard time putting anybody in it. So I do have a little reservation with the map, but I'm okay with it that the market's going to dictate, I think, some of this. And the planning commission, I do agree with Sissy, will hopefully help dictate the rest of that.
All right, folks, so I have read the resolution. How do we need to move forward?
So I move that we pass the attached resolution.
Second. All right, so we have a motion on the table to pass the resolution as read. Any further discussion?
I thought this was the first reading to go till February.
That's for the ordinance. So we're talking about the resolution.
The resolution is to designate the map.
Right.
That's what we're voting on now.
Point of order, please. Can you just read the resolution again, very clear? Thank you.
A resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, designating areas of the city as the residential targeted areas for the purpose of establishing a multifamily property tax exemption program. So that's the resolution that we are currently, I think we have a motion for.
My concern is, as I said tonight, it's kind of blanketing the whole city. The concept is excellent. The concept has certainly worked in other areas. I'm just uncomfortable that we're starting out by basically blanketing the whole city. So I just would be more comfortable if we designated some areas. Usually, the concept of government is you make an incremental change and then you see what the unintended consequences are, or how it works. You can adjust it. This is just a huge step right now. So although I do absolutely support the concept, I need a little more information before I can move forward with this large of an area of change.
Just a quick question. I'm sorry, I seem to be 3 inches of mercury behind the power curve tonight. Was this resolution, was there a motion and second, so we don't, after your reading, we don't need to do that again?
Correct.
Okay, just help me out with that.
Correct. So at this, we're just discussing under
And
the
then we
motion.
call for a vote. Okay.
So just to address what Councilwoman Kidd said, and I think that she brings up some really reasonable points. One thing that we will talk about in the ordinance as it comes up is that, as written, this tax exemption is going to be, the time for filing is going to be allowed for 3 years. And so there is a point at which we will, we can readdress it. So we're not creating an ongoing, never-ending.
All right, any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
All right, so there's 6-1. So now we are going to open the public hearing, under this open public hearing for the ordinance.
No, there's no public hearing on the ordinance. The public hearing was for the designation of the targeted areas. So, we just lumped all these things together on the agenda because they tend to go together, but there's no public hearing required for the ordinance. There's just a first reading of the ordinance.
So let me do the first reading of the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, creating property tax exemptions for multifamily housing. So are there any Questions, comments on this? Right, but then we'll continue that with that, but now let's discuss the ordinances. Are there any issues on this ordinances?
So in the development phase of this, I mean, we're talking about multifamily and 4 or more units. These are projects that aren't quick to get off the ground and get going. This is a financial incentive to help developers be able to build those kinds of new housing units or potentially rehab them. And so in regard to the time to filing the application, this Councilmember mentioned, as currently drafted, the draft ordinance says that it will accept applications from March 1st of this year through March 1st of 2022. I think potentially if there's projects that somebody has kind of ready to go, but they just need to do the financing, that 3-year timeline might work. But in other developments we've seen in the community, 3 years is a really short time to get this off the ground. And since we're talking about not short-term, but mid-term and long-term solutions to a housing situation that is 1.8% rental vacancy rate based on 2016 statistics, and it should be more like 6. And some of the other things we've heard in the public hearing today, I really think it makes sense for us to just evaluate the program as of March 1st, 2022, rather than terminate the program as the draft ordinance is written. I'd be happy to hear arguments to the contrary.
Well, are there any comments to that? Because I do, when I read that, I thought, well, okay, if it's not working, sunset in some ways. And if it's working, we get to continue it if we want to. So I'm okay whether we evaluate it and then at that point kill it or, extend it. So either way, it's okay, but I do understand it is a short window, especially for building projects. They always take longer. So I'm really okay either way.
I feel like I should know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. If it stays as written, if someone has started a project like 2 months before the deadline, are they captured in that? And then it would just be anything after that date if it wasn't extended?
The 3 years is a limitation on the time to present a completed application.
Okay.
So you have to have the application in, completed application in within 3 years. That doesn't mean that the project has to be built or all completed by it. It's just the application deadline.
And so really, we're kind of putting a hook out there that could take us anywhere 6 to 8 years into the future as far as these projects. Because they could apply and their project can still take a few years to go to completion. So I'm fine with the time frame that we have listed, so long as we do readdress it.
Well, as written, it's not requiring us to readdress it unless that's in somewhere else. So this 3-year time frame is in page 12G. It's under proposed PA Municipal Code 17.46.040, sub C, sub 1. So, I mean, if we want to readdress it, which the mayor mentioned and Councilmember French mentioned, then let's have that language say this project will be, or this policy will be reviewed at that time, and the council will consider whether to renew it. Right now, there's no requirement for that. So I hear council members expressing an interest in that, but what you're proposing is not what the text says.
So I would agree that we do need to review, to take a look at this before it expires, to see how it is or where it's at. So yes.
I like having that language in there too, just so we, something else hasn't come up and we blow right past it, and then a week later someone comes in and says, oh, I'm interested in this. Oh, well, now I gotta go through the process again. I like that idea.
So
I would concur, because this is a huge leap. It's not a small step forward, it's a huge leap. And we really do need to at some point say, let's stop and review this. Are we having success with this? Or are there, unintended consequences? What have we created, and what is
what has been the outcome, and I just think it's good to be done.
I'll just point out there's other ways to do that review too. We could do it, say, after 5 applications have been submitted, the city will review. So we don't have to set it as a time frame. Yeah, and there's no reason that we have to have it sunset. You know, after we review it, then let's say, okay, is this policy working? If not, let's change it. But just having it sunset means we're likely to lose track of it if no one's using it, and we might want to say, okay, the incentive wasn't enough, let's keep going. We really don't know, I think, whether this is enough to get some of these projects going.
I agree, so I appreciate you bringing that up, and so we do want to review this ordinance as it progresses through, and maybe we do, we add language 1 to for sure review it right before it sunsets, and then 2, if we see that we have 10 applications come through or 5 applications come through, let's just take a look where, how, what, where, so if Glenn can keep us abreast of how successful it is throughout these next 3 years. That would be great, because housing is a really critical issue for our community, and we really need to know what's going on. I have a comment that is unrelated to the sunsetting time, but it has to do with the TAC. Let's see, it's 17.46.040 on page F11. It says the tax exemption terms and project eligibility. So the very first one's for the 8 years, and it says that, basically, if the apartments are going to be market rate rather than affordable, that one of the things is, supplying additional parking or structured parking. Now, I don't know, depending on its location, I don't think that that's an advantage we want to, I don't think we want to use parking as one of those advantages, but sometimes we may just be taking up land that could be easily dealt with, with transit, rather than having to put parking. So I would want to, it's under 1A, market rate, and it says, because in there it says the enhanced design, which makes sense, public art makes sense, enhanced landscaping, enhanced infrastructure, sidewalks and things like that, and then it says additional parking. And that one is something I would not want to have on that list.
I think for public safety, if we don't have appropriate parking for new residents, new residential units, people park on the street, and then our streets become one way, and we see that where there's a lack of appropriate parking, with people parking cars on both sides. We have to have fire trucks get through easily. We have to have ambulances get through easily. We have to not create unsafe situations, and by not addressing the parking issue up front, we clog the streets with vehicles and create driving hazards for everyone who lives there. So I think that's a public safety issue.
Right, but this is additional parking. This doesn't say adequate parking. This means, we'll have adequate parking, and on top of that, we'll have additional parking as an enhancement. And so that's the part where I disagree with this.
Madam Mayor, I'm also able to speak to that. So actually, this is a great part of the ordinance. It's a little bit unique to state law. So the intent here is simply hearing from the council about their desire to have great design buildings in our community. The intent here is that there is a way to demonstrate above and beyond the minimum design requirements if they want the 8-year exemption. So we are certainly able to change that language in that specific section. It's not a section that is, restricted by state law. And the intent, I think, was it was using other cities as examples. The intent was certainly that structured parking is more desirable than surface parking, but we are certainly available and willing to change that specific language.
Okay. And I'm okay with having structured parking. I'm not okay with having additional parking.
I would have to respectfully disagree with you on that, because if we're putting additional feet, additional parking, and so I would agree with Councilmember Kidd that this becomes a safety issue. If we already have single dwelling homes that are clogging the streets now. If we have four families in a dwelling, I do believe not only structured parking, but additional parking is a safety issue rather than an aesthetic issue. And so additional people, by its very nature, is going to dictate additional parking requirements. So I would be opposed to removing that language from this section.
So I would just point out that when we require developers to put in a parking spot for each unit, we are putting a barrier, we're putting red tape, a regulation in the way of them making money and doing projects.
Anybody else want to? Well, just based on my personal experience growing up in Seattle, I grew up on a street that was essentially one way because nobody has garages and everyone parks on the street, and the street is narrow enough that you end up, someone has to pull over for someone else to get by. The fire department still got to my house within 2.5 minutes, and every apparatus had a spot that needed to be, and they got to our house without any trouble. So I understand the thought process behind your argument, and I think that our streets are so wide, most of them, that I don't see that as a real compelling reason to require extra parking. And I think the more we continue to support car infrastructure, the less we're going to encourage other kinds of transportation. Biking, walking, busing. There's very little in our community that incentivizes adults to take public transportation instead of driving. And I think if we don't start making those incremental changes, we're never going to get there, and this is a potential opportunity to do that.
I totally agree.
So I've been reading this book called Sustainable Transportation Planning, and when I was out of town, I loaned it to Manager West, and I've been able to extend the loan from WashDOT through our local library, so that's been great. One of the things I recommended in terms of some of these kind of planning is require bicycle parking in multi-unit dwellings. And it's, whoa, wait, we require parking for cars, but what about moving beyond the assumption that everybody's going to have a car? Because big picture in our community, a lot of people as they age are interested in being able to stay in the place where they live. And one of the aspects is as one gets older, is eventually one needs to say, I'm not driving anymore. Sometimes that happens more easily than other times. But if we really believe in aging in place and a community that values people throughout their childhood when they're not driving, adulthood when many people are able to drive, but not everybody is able to drive. And then as people get older, where a number of people are not able to drive, we need to look beyond the idea that every place we build is going to be a spot where somebody's able to drive, and that's their primary means of traveling around in our community. So I agree with the idea of, in this, this is the such as clause, so I don't think it matters that much, but the meaning of it is there, that this language, additional parking or structured parking, I mean, we're implying car. We're not, I assume this wasn't written to say additional bike parking. But when we're talking about these kinds of units, and we're talking about places where in our city we should be building more concentrated development in terms of apartments or multifamily housing, we want to be looking beyond the idea that the city is about traveling around in cars. As we look at downtown and what housing is going to look like downtown, this came up at the Port Angeles Realtors Association that Councilmember French and I spoke at last Thursday morning. With 50 people in the room, one of the questions was, well, how will parking work downtown? People are living downtown. And, what if we didn't need to have a car to live in Port Angeles? When I lived in Spokane, I lived downtown, and during those 3 years, we didn't have a car. But we were able to get to the places we wanted to go. And life was a lot more convenient because we didn't have a car, which is the sort of thing that happens when you're in a denser urban area. And we're talking about downtown areas as well. So this is going to be one of our big challenges. It's been a very expensive, time for us to deal with the amount of infrastructure required to maintain a car-based, auto-based transportation system. And as we think about things like multifamily housing, we need to also think about how people move around and take a transit-oriented development approach and look at all the costs of automobile travel. One of the other recommendations from Jeffrey Tomlin's book, Sustainable Transportation Planning, when dealing with the automobile is to figure out and show people the cost of automobile travel. And the problem is only a little bit of that cost is paid incrementally by the user of the car. We think, oh, I just have to buy a tank of gas and then I can go where I want. But there's also some embedded costs of insurance and maintenance and purchase of the car. Those are all borne by the individual. But there's also about the same amount of cost borne by the government in order to provide the infrastructure for that car. And I mean, if we explore this idea even further, I mean, our stormwater utility is basically due to the amount of road surface in our community. So, you know, as we go forward, this is going to be one of our big challenges as a community. Is how do we transition away from an automobile-dependent urban landscape and transition to walkable, livable communities, which is ultimately what most people want to live in when we think about how we structure our urban space.
Is it possible to, because this is a such as clause, I really like the idea of not necessarily mandatory, but suggesting as an option bike parking, and it struck me while you were talking that, in fact, both of the apartments that we lived in Portland, one, we had to actually pay extra to have a place to put our bikes, but we wouldn't have been able to keep the bikes because it came with a parking spot, so they acknowledged that you might bring a car. But when you have 800 square feet and 4 people, where do you put the bikes? And the second time when there were 4 people in 800 square feet, which was fine, we fit, but had we had all of our bikes and our bike trailer and all of that, that would have been really challenging, and we actually did go for about 9 months without a car. And so having the option to have an indoor safe space that isn't in your apartment to park your bike does encourage people to keep the bikes they already have and consider buying one if they don't already have one. And we know that around here there are a lot of other reasons to have a bike to be able to enjoy being outdoors. So I think that would be kind of a fun thing to include.
So, I want to move us forward, but go ahead.
I guess I'm confused here because the language says additional parking. It does not say additional car parking, okay? And so bike parking can be assumed under this language also. So I guess I'm not following the logic here because parking can mean bike parking. It does not specify automobile parking. So again, I would be opposed to removing that language.
Well, I think what they're saying is maybe clarifying to say adding bike parking, so it could also be clarifying that bike parking could be that. All right. I think we've exhausted this. We will continue.
I've got more stuff that's unrelated to what we're talking about. So one thing that we haven't touched on is the permit itself, the cost of it. And right now, I believe that the permit as printed to apply for this is $1,000. So I just want to make sure that all the council was comfortable with that level. I point out the city of Seattle has a similar ordinance. Their fee for large developments is $10,000 and for smaller developments $4,500. So I feel I was fine with a $1,000 fee. But I was also wondering if we could have a structured fee where we have, you know, kind of other like target areas where we have a lower fee, where we actually actively want, such as downtown. That was an idea that came to me. So, you know, a reduced fee for if you're doing a mixed-use development downtown, rehabilitating a vacant building that's been applied or something, you know what I mean? That's just in my head, all this.
Just because I'm sure it gets messier for the sake of management, but I don't know.
So council, I
It's just a
think
thought.
the fee is simply intended to recoup the amount of time that staff would put in. I can tell you the fee as proposed wouldn't come close to recouping that amount of effort. Looking at the process that the state has laid out relative to this exemption, it's a pretty substantial process, and it can go on for years. And as we talked about earlier, those timeframes can really get elongated. I think in general, those processes will probably be consistent regardless of location, and therefore we didn't present a structured fee, but we can certainly look at that in the future. I think if we're going to keep on track and approve this at the February 5th meeting, we probably don't have time to build in or evaluate the appropriateness of a structured fee, but we can certainly come back to that in the future if that's important to council.
That's right. The other last thing on my list is under 17.46.040, tax exemption terms and project eligibility. If we're going to see project eligibility, let me see. It says permanent residential housing. This is on, in mine, it's page 12G of the packet.
It's F12 on,
Okay.
F12 on the printed.
So permanent residential housing, at least 50% of the space designated for multifamily housing must be provided for permanent residential housing as defined in PAMC. And then also under that, in the definitions, they mentioned permanent residential occupancy means multifamily housing that provides either rental or an occupancy for a period of at least 1 month. This excludes other predominantly offered rental accommodation on a daily or weekly basis. Would that allow short-term rentals to fall under multifamily housing? Is that an issue we care to address? And then my question was, why the 50%? I don't know if there's a logic behind that or if that's just state language.
Councilmember, that is explicitly intended to restrict short-term rentals, which would be like a hotel, motel type of use, and that is state language.
Okay.
All right, so at this point, let's move forward. If you guys are all done, so we will continue this conversation to the February 5th meeting. So, and then we'll continue. All right, it is 7:35, and so we did say that we were going to try to move to the think tank discussions beginning at 7:30 if possible or earlier. So if council's okay, do we want to move there? I don't have very long items for this, but.
How about this, get rid of the consent agenda real quick? We haven't touched that yet. Knock that off and move to the next thing.
Okay. So
And
let's.
I'd like to add a lead item at some point when we get to that item of the agenda.
Okay. So let me read the consent agenda. City Council minutes for the December 4th and 18th, 2018. Expense reports from December 8th, 2018 to January 5th, 2019 in the amount of $3,377,660.48. The emergency declaration ratification December 14th storm, pass that resolution, and the 2019 lodging tax event grant award.
I move the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, seeing none.
I'm not sure you have that dollar amount correct under the expenditure report.
$3,377,960.48. Did I say something?
160 before that.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
I just had one quick question on the lodging tax event grants. I read it and I commend the committee because I know how much time and how much work they put into. And there was an absolutely new event, PA Rams basketball team. I've never heard of it, and we're giving them money. I just want to know, who are they? They must have given a good presentation because they got some funding, so.
They did. They
Tell us.
came, and I'm sorry that I'm so awful with names, so hopefully one of you guys will fill in with a name. Brendan. And they came in and they talked about how, it's getting young men out there playing basketball. And I know, especially because they started at the tribe, I think it was called tribe, and then they worked around. And so it is trying to get a basketball team started. So they're gonna do that. It was great energy because they can do this. And so we'll give it up. So it was, unless any of you guys want to fill in more on that.
Well, that was just it.
Madam Mayor, Council, there's also a Peninsula Daily News article on the new Rams team. And we'd be happy to send that link to City Council.
I love it, thanks. So it was wonderful, and I do appreciate Lodging Tax Committee worked hard on deciding how the money was spent. We are going to have one more extra meeting to figure out exactly some of the priorities, and we'll be also meeting with the county to work together on so thank you. All right, any further discussion on the agenda, on the consent agenda? The motion, okay? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is passed unanimously, and we'll move on to the think tank discussion. So I know I had 2 items to bring to you guys. Are there anybody else who would like to bring items up for the think tank?
I just had a question, it's not really, well, maybe it's just a comment. I would like to send everyone, there were 2 interesting articles that I think might spur some interesting conversation. One about Minneapolis, who recently, at least in a very brief articulation of it, eliminated single-family housing zoning. Grand Rapids, Michigan apparently did that about a decade ago, and they have recently reported on sort of what that looks like now. And I think just because we seem to keep circling back around to zoning, I thought it might be something interesting for council to look at, so I was going to email those to people if they're interested. And then maybe it can be on a think tank agenda another time.
I think that's excellent. And I just, I guess following up on that, I just put a folder on there about the anti-tax for the vacant building information, and I threw in about, I don't know, there's 12 or 14 articles in there, so maybe our service space might be also a place to keep that stuff. So, go ahead, Jim.
On February 13th and 14th, as you know, we're going to be going, delegations going down to Olympia to attend the AWC statewide legislative. And I would just like to get a feel from other council members what we should go down there and twist their arms.
Okay, so, and yeah, we definitely need to come up with a legislative agenda.
I also have legislative priorities written down, so I'm glad that.
I do too.
I was reading over here.
The one thing that I would want to talk about is, especially in the aftermath of the winter ice village downtown, is pedestrian safety issues downtown. I saw quite a few close calls.
Can you clarify what you're saying?
With Winter Ice Village, it was situated right next to a in-block crosswalk, mid-block crosswalk. It's not well lit, cars do not abide by it, and it was unsafe generally. It's the way it is, but I think that there are things that we can do to make it better.
Okay. Any other items?
I just wanted to talk about legislative priorities.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to add, I brought this up at our last council meeting and council report, but we are going to be renovating public restrooms, and there's a lot of research between when our current public restrooms and some of our parks are built, and now about best practices and design standards. And I'd like to see that incorporated into these projects. I'm not sure if that needs council direction. I don't want to micromanage the actual contracting, but I do think it's our place to set policy goals in our public infrastructure, including restrooms.
Okay. Okay. And like I said, I will bring this charter for compassion and also just to bring those up. So we got a lot of stuff to discuss tonight. So I'm wondering if I think the public restrooms. You said there's. Do you want to bring forth some of the ideas that have happened in other places, and therefore then we can discuss things that may be useful to staff for the next think tank?
Well, I mean, I would like us to say when we design or redesign, it's rather design actually, public restrooms will follow best practice guidelines. And the ones that I've seen, and there might be others, and maybe the other ones are better, but the ones I've seen are on the website of the organization, Flush Public Hygiene Lets Us Stay Human. And that's an organization that advocates for accessible public restrooms. And they've got a very specific list of what works or what doesn't work. For example, they don't recommend what I refer to as gang bathrooms, where you have a bunch of stalls all in the same space. They recommend located bathrooms in publicly visible locations. Ultimately, a lot of those design aspects lead to bathrooms that can be open 24/7, which has a lot of accessibility issues for people who are out. And we're talking about being a walkable place. If you're walking and you're not getting to your destination in a few minutes, like in a car, you might want to stop and use the bathroom on the way. So those are the design criteria that I think we should follow. And so if that means us as the council saying, we adopt these design criteria with public restroom, then that's what I like to see.
So I know we're going to do some bathroom redesigns, Mr. Alcott. So I'm just wondering, would it be, I think, how we bring staff in as well? Because I know it's part of the work plan, and this is the Flush Public Hygiene website that you said. So whether that's something that you would like to review and as you're doing your plans for redesign of bathrooms, to see how well that fits some of those?
So Madam Mayor, it is on our work plan and strategic plan, and in the CFP for restroom replacements. Part of 2019 is kind of reviewing websites and things that Councilmember just mentioned. There's many more as well, but there's also, we've really got to look strategically at our existing restrooms and adding additional restrooms. So we'll be evaluating that this year with hopes construction next year. But that is something we can definitely present to the council at some point.
So that would be great, because I said it's already in the work plan, and if you can take a look and include this Flush Public Hygiene, and then we can all have a discussion as to, I guess, the design guidelines.
And just to tag on a small bit, we just had a debriefing meeting with all the people that did the homeless challenge, the public officials and private officials that did it, and restroom use is one of the big issues with regards to that. So I do support this coming back and having some discussion on it.
Right. So would that satisfy the public restroom discussions that gets brought back to staff when they're ready to do the review of all the designs? Because this year will be design and planning, and then next year will be construction.
I'm not exactly sure. I'd like us to say, these are our design goals for this project. And then, actually see what can meet that. That might have been what Director Ellicott said. But that's my goal, is that we set policy direction. And just to clarify, because there's a request, the website for principles is www.flush, which is phlush.org/public restroom planning / public restroom design principles. There's some hyphens in there, but that'll get you to it. And it lays out design principles for public restrooms.
The only other thing I'd add is there are members of the public that probably have some input. I know there's a lot of downtown business owners that have a lot to say about this issue.
And council, I think this is probably an item that we might bring forward for a small work session. I want to just reiterate what Councilmember French said, that this really was the top priority issue that many of us saw in our experience in the evening that we spent out on the street. That is a real priority issue. But it's also important we balance that with the challenges of keeping some of those maintained. And I think looking at some of those new principles and goals is quite important, and that's something we'll schedule for council in the future.
Great, thank you. All right, that's great. So I think that legislative agenda items are really, really critical. So let's begin with that. What are some ideas that everybody has?
Mike and I were downtown last Wednesday and saw Steve Farringer, who mentioned, and I'm going to botch exactly what he said, and I did not have a chance to call his office this week to ask them to clarify, which I will be happy to do. But two big issues on his agenda are mental health, specifically, I think, medically assisted treatment, and also broadband. And I think both of those have some value in our community as well. And so I think if we can work two sides of the same coin, supporting him by bringing some advocacy for him to share on behalf of Port Angeles helps him move that forward, and we can build into that potentially, here's how Port Angeles would like to see that work for us. So those are just two things that I know are on Theringer's agenda that I think it would be worth exploring how that might be beneficial to us and supporting that for him.
I think that sounds like a good plan. Jim?
Forgive me if you've heard me say this before, but stormwater. Our staff, led by Nathan, put together an extremely detailed and well thought out response to the stormwater permit request for comments. And I sat through that Department of Ecology presentation. I would rather chew aluminum foil than do that again. But having said that, it was very disconcerting to have the Department of Ecology person stand up there in front of the public and say they don't really care about how this affects the economy of Port Angeles. And that in conjunction with the fact that all this staff work that went into staff time that went into putting this very well thought out and very detailed and supportive report and comment on the proposed stormwater regulations not only was not given the courtesy of acknowledgement, but there has been no feedback on it whatsoever. And I think it's time that we in Port Angeles let the state legislature know that we have a little bit different environment than Seattle and Bellevue and even Centralia. And so I would like to bend as many arms and ears and buttonholes as I possibly can down there and talk to them about how one size does not fit all when it comes to stormwater regulations. And I would like to see them give our staff the courtesy of a response to their very well done comments on the stormwater issue.
Thank you. Any other topics?
I agree with Councilmember Moran about requesting a response from ecology if that hasn't already happened. I also like that we mentioned to our legislators to support the Waterfront Center, which is planning on requesting funds from the state. Also, following our meeting on Thursday with the Port Angeles Realtors Association, I had the opportunity to talk with the local legislative liaison for Washington Realtors here, and the Washington Realtors legislative agenda is, not surprising, all about housing, but I think there's a lot of alignment with what we were talking about. One of their 7 items is expanding the multifamily tax exemption, which of course we were just talking about today. So I'd like us to consider supporting that agenda as well.
So supporting the realtors agenda for the legislature?
I'd like us to consider it. I want to share it with the rest of the council and staff, but that's one of the things I'd like to mention.
Okay. Yes, sure.
Okay, Public Works Trust Fund. It was set up, and Mr. Burke, you were not in your position when we lost that funding, so I hope you're familiar with it. But the Public Works Trust Fund was set up as a trust fund so the cities could borrow funds at 1%, put in infrastructure that we need, and then we pay it back. It's a revolving fund. All the cities could tap into it, and it was set up as a trust fund, which means it was a dedicated funding source for the city. Legislature rated it, swept it, basically, took the funds, and now there are very little amounts of funding going into it, and all the cities can no longer, we have to take much higher loans out, and it's just not available to us. It was set up as a trust fund for our cities. We've lost that. We really need that back. It's for our city, for all the cities. I think that's so important that we have dedicated funding once again for the Public Works Trust Fund, because it's costing us lots of money when we have to take out other loans that we no longer can access this. Another area that's really critical is funding for public safety, sustainable funding for visible policing. So the standard for policing is 2 officers per 1,000 people in the community, per 1,000 population. We're under that, we're way under that. And in fact, I think Washington State is the lowest in the nation. Is Chief Smith, if you can help me with these figures. We have a problem. We're down 1 police officer now, aren't we, Chief Smith?
Councilmember Kidd, from our authorized strength of 33, that's correct.
Okay.
And we're...
How long does it take, or by the time we hire one, how long does it take to train and get that officer on the streets in Port Angeles?
So, from hiring to training, it depends, of course, on the circumstances with the academy, but we can expect a year and a half. Year and a half is a normal time we can wait.
That's really unacceptable. So I'm asking for 2 things. One is that they increased funds for the academy so we can get people trained, and once we hire someone, to have them a year and a half before they're serving the people of Port Angeles is really unacceptable. So we need more funding for the police academy, and then we need sustainable fundings to increase our police force, because we're way below the level that we really like to be. For instance, we don't have someone available to be our downtown resource officer. We really need public safety funding.
And anybody else?
I thought of a couple more things, so I was sitting here.
Well, actually, before you go.
Yes.
let me go.
Yeah, sure, that's fair enough.
The bioforce tech is one of the items that I'd like to put on there. It is a way of dealing with our sewage sludge that is using technology from Italy, being used now in California.
What's it called?
The company is Bioforce Tech, and it is a pyrolytic converter that takes the sewage sludge, the dried stuff, and it actually with I guess it's a pyrolysis that goes through it, and it comes out as biochar, which is at this point inert. It takes care of the chemicals, the pharmaceuticals, and right now they're testing that biochar to make sure that it is safe and something that we could use actually to benefit us rather than.
So what do you do with a load of biochar?
It's really helpful and useful for heights.
It becomes a fertilizer?
Yes, it does. And it's kind of like, I don't know, say carbon, but yeah, so biochar is something that you can actually spread, and there are no issues of leaching, of heavy metals. There's no issues that we currently see with our garden core. So that's one of the new things. It looks like we're looking probably it's going to be 2.5 million plus or minus, depending on, we gotta take a look at that price tag. But that would give us a way into the future on how to deal with sewage sludge. That's one of the things I know that we're looking at. When you mentioned mental health, I know we had a conversation with the folks as to Doc Rick, who's now being called Rick, so from Serenity House. Rick was saying that when he went to Victoria, what's happening now is they are doing the same thing where the police and the social services folks go out there together. And so when a person gets arrested, they don't go directly to jail, they go directly to services. And if there is a service needed, especially mental health or something like that, that happens before any arrests or anything like that. And so what it's done is it's absolutely saved on jail costs, on prosecution costs, and the person actually gets the services they need. So I think that talk about helping Theringer, maybe this is something that we can start pushing forward. So, and that's all I got right now.
So I have a meeting on the 24th with Dr. Robbins from the college. And there's some funding issues from for how the state allocates funds to community colleges, and there may be some advocacy issues that he can articulate more clearly for me on that day, but there's certainly some budget issues at the college, and I think it's really an asset for our community. And so if there's a way for us to support their needs, that would be helpful. And in a 2-for-1, certainly our school district was very negatively, the Port Angeles School District was very negatively impacted by the formula that they used for McCleary. And so if there's any way, if there's any room on either of those 2 fronts for support, education is certainly an important part of our community. And so those are 2, we're getting a pretty long list, but those are 2 things that with a little more information we might want to consider.
And so I'm thinking, okay, so that's 10 to 11 items, which we want to try to probably get down to about 3. So we may, I guess we'll have a discussion and then we'll try to figure out, we'll work on this with Manager West.
Mayor and Council, what we will work to do is discuss some of those items as staff. I know that staff already have some other items that they would like to bring to the attention of council, but ultimately we would like to bring before you a legislative briefing paper on February 5th, so that ultimately council can review those priorities and take action on February 5th in time for the AWC conference.
Well, great. Thank you guys for those ideas, and that's wonderful. So you're going to bring that thing from Minneapolis for us to discuss in the future?
Yeah, I'm thinking I can just email those articles, assuming that I stored them somewhere safe so I can find them again online.
Okay. And then pedestrian issues?
So I guess like I said, there's these mid-block crosswalks, and even just the intersection crosswalks downtown are not generally well lit. When people make left turns, they often look for pedestrians. Sometimes they're very close. In the summer, you can stand at the fountain and see a pedestrian almost get hit daily. My suggestion is we have timed traffic lights and one-way, 2-lane streets. And the timing of the traffic lights incentivizes drivers to speed to make the next light. And we should not time our traffic lights together, and we should slow traffic down significantly by having untimed, differently triggered traffic lights.
I gotta admit, you're absolutely right that once you make that first one, if you go exactly at that same spot, but if you barely make that first one, you're trying to catch up, and that does incentivize the speed along that list. But you must admit that it's also really convenient if you make that first one to make the second one and third. So, but you're absolutely right that it's for the convenience of the auto person and not for the convenience of the city.
And, just from an economic development standpoint, it's convenience to travel through and out of downtown quickly, and that's not in our best interest. We should incentivize people to stop at stoplights and look around at the businesses that are right there. And so every stoplight, they should be timed so you stop at every stoplight downtown. Someone, I don't want to name in the audience, but mentioned that we should have a week where we have all of the stoplights blinking red, all directions for the entire week, and just experience 4-way stops downtown, which would work. Traffic would slow down to a crawl, pedestrians would be far safer, and it would be fine.
We had that actually happen when the lights were out. And it was,
Kind of.
Yes.
Sometimes they blink yellow. When one side blinks yellow, the other side blinks red, then it's confusing and bad.
Yeah. but like I said, all blinking or no lights whatsoever. But
What you're saying is, you would like these cars to sit at those lights and continue to pollute our sidewalks and back traffic up. There is actually a city, it's Frederickson over by Puyallup. When you start at one end, and it goes, I bet you probably 6 miles. Signal light, signal light, signal light, signal light, signal light. Whoever timed those things spent a lot of time, a lot of ingenuity, and a lot of genius there. Because every single one of those lights are designed to go through at 45 miles an hour. If you're at the start of it, next one goes, next one goes, next one goes. It's to keep traffic flowing. I understand the safety of the public, I watched a young kid run across that sidewalk, slipped and fell and went right down in the street. Also, when we have folks walking down these sidewalks, these brick sidewalks, and it's over the top of your shoe with water, and people are walking out around the sidewalks, out on cars, out in the street, over against the fence line. There was a puddle in front of the Ice Village there that was easily 6 inches deep at one point in the rain. And there's so many things, I think, that lead up to what you were saying, public safety for folks. In front of a restaurant, kitty corner from the corner house there. You cannot, in the rain, get onto that sidewalk without standing in a puddle that's most likely going to be over most people's shoes.
I support fixing that.
But as far as keeping cars sitting downtown, no. No way. There is research that's been put out when the price of gas went way up about people that were turning their cars off at red lights, people that were turning their cars off and coasting down hills, which is extremely dangerous. People that were doing all these efficient things to try and save $1, save gas, and now we're going to sit at a red light. No way.
I'll try and synthesize these two ideas together and say, well, why don't we just not have cars downtown? No, just kidding. Just kidding. So, there's research on pedestrian safety, which Councilmember Kidd brought up earlier as well, and I think that's important when we consider encouraging people to use a space as pedestrians like downtown, which is really the most, one of the best ways to be downtown. That when somebody's hit by a car, or when a pedestrian's hit by a car traveling 20 miles per hour, 1 in 10 pedestrians will die from that collision. At 30 miles per hour, when the car's traveling at 30 miles per hour, 5 out of 10 pedestrians will die from that collision. And at 40 miles per hour, 9 out of 10 pedestrians will die from that collision. So when we're talking about pedestrian safety, and safety in relation to traffic, we really should keep in mind that keeping traffic slow is one of the best things we can do for safety, for human life and safety. So with that in mind, there's also some research that says, you even want to go below 20 miles per hour in a pedestrian zone, so more like, 12 to 18 miles per hour. So it's not so much cars stop downtown, but cars should be moving slowly through downtown. I shouldn't be naturally feeling like I can drive through downtown faster than 20 miles per hour. And so with that thought in mind, and also these puddles, which I took some photos of to watch like a whole group of people walk like right up next to the New Day wall and avoid that puddle. It's just amazing, and also in front of the Ice Village as well. But something happened with those, and I don't know the backstory, but like we need to just redo the bricklaying of those. That's an infrastructure project that's going to encourage people to use downtown well, especially during the off season. Like on the Ice Village, which is going to be expanded next year with a longer season. That's an infrastructure project that's going to encourage more overnight visitors, right? So let's put in a lodging tax application for improving walkability and pedestrian safety downtown, which could improve sidewalks, it could improve some of these traffic and pedestrian issues, and potentially use that revenue source, which we've said we want to see more infrastructure with the lodging tax. Let's use that to repair some of these issues downtown.
Mr. Burke, I'm going to give away your secret. The lights downtown are timed exactly for 20 miles an hour.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so
So you're trying
you don't know that already?
You're trying to race to hit the first one so that you can hit the second one so you get the third one.
I just think if we deliberately mess up the lights that cause inconvenience to everyone coming off the ferry, anyone coming into our downtown, we will have fewer visitors to our downtown, and our downtown will have a reputation that we can't get back, because once you drive people away for a negative reason, and then they won't be back. So we really, 20 miles an hour is great, let's just leave it.
So what I'm suggesting is how our work downtown works all summer long. The traffic is thick, it's slow, you hit every light and you stop at every light. That's how it works all day, all year, all summer long. I work there every day and you stop at every light. What I'm suggesting is longer times in between lights so the pedestrians have more time. That basically gives the side streets more time, which slows, gives us extended times for those crossings.
Attention city folks, there's no school during the summertime. The boulevard is a great way to get across town without going through downtown.
Yes.
During the summertime, there are school zones and children up there during the winter.
So, as Lindsay pointed out, 20 miles an hour is what I think the cars should go. They do not. In our non-summer times of the year, the cars do not go 20 miles an hour. You can come to downtown association meetings with me sometime and listen to them talk for half an hour to an hour about pedestrian safety downtown, how they see the cars whizzing by, how they see the people passing. And this is, I work downtown every day of my life. Cars do not go 20 miles an hour. It's because of how we designed our roads, because we have 2 one-way streets with 2 lanes. They're wide. The cars don't go 20 miles an hour.
And I do know that we have it in our vision to follow the AIA, which says that we are going to try to decouple First and Front Streets. So that's hoping that we will work our way to making that vision happen.
And I think changing the time of the stoplights is just like a teeny tiny step that gets us a little bit closer.
Just one brief comment on this conversation as well. There's some areas as well where we intentionally, well, maybe not intentionally, but we are putting a direct conflict with pedestrians and turning vehicles. So for example, say you're getting off the ferry in Newport Angeles, you go up Laurel Street and then you're facing a fountain and you're going to take a left onto Front Street, First Street. And there's an arrow there that says turn left on green. You turn left on green. It just so happens that the pedestrians crossing there to your left also got their walk signal at exactly the same time that you got your green arrow. So we just changed the timing of that. Let the pedestrians get out first, have the arrow, but we're timing it so that there's a delay there whenever there's a pedestrian at that spot, which is pretty frequent because it's the center of Port Angeles.
There is no green arrow down there. That would signify that you're good to turn left and don't look for pedestrians most of the time, but maybe an arrow, maybe
it's not a green arrow,
it's
a green line.
Sorry, it's a green line, not a green arrow. So, sorry.
All right. Anything else on this thing? Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to move on to the charter. So I want to let you know that as part of Clallam County, we are all invited to participate in the Charter for Compassion, which was started here this January with a community book read, which is called The 12 Steps to Compassionate Living by Karen Armstrong. We will be asked to endorse this charter as a goal and an aspiration for all of us individually and collectively. So Seattle was one of the first cities to endorse this international charter. Since then, Lake Forest Park, which is a population of about 13,000 or so, and then Lacey has also adopted it, which is 47, and Spokane has also enrolled in this work in Washington. The goal is to encourage our local individuals, organizations, schools, churches, service clubs, nonprofits, government entities to endorse this charter by the end of 2019. And begin the assessment process available to the whole, all this stuff is on the website. They have a big website on this. That may include putting 1 to 5 to 10 year plan into action. So this effort is being led by Marilyn Esch, and I do truly believe that using this charter can create a more connected and compassionate world. One person, one group, and one community at a time. So with that, let me read the charter to you so that you guys are kind of going to pass this charter. It says the Charter for Compassion. And one thing I need you to know, that please note that although religion is mentioned, there is no call to any single religion, and it also works for atheism as well. So it says the principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions, calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves. Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures, to dethrone ourselves from the center of our world, and to put another there, and to honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being, treating everybody without exception with absolute justice, equity, and respect. It is also necessary in both public and private life to refrain consistently and emphatically from inflicting pain, to act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest, to impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody, and to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies, is a denial of our common humanity. We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately and that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion. We therefore call upon all men and women to restore compassion to the center of morality and religion, to return to the ancient principle that any interpretation of Scripture that breeds violence, hatred, or disdain is illegitimate, and to ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information about other traditions, religions, and cultures, to encourage a positive appreciation of cultural and religious diversity, to cultivate an informed empathy with the suffering of all human beings, even those regarded as enemies. We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world, rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness. Compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries. Born of a deep interdependence, compassion is essential to human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity. It is the path of enlightenment and indispensable to the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community. So I guess for the next think tank, I would like to bring to you guys a summary of the first 2 chapters of this book and get your opinions on this compassion charter. So if you could take a look at that. And I would say one of the things that this group has asked is, what is your definition of compassion and how does it fit for you? It is interesting that I've given at the very bottom of that sheet a link to one of the TED Talks, and it's amazing how sometimes showing compassion for someone can turn a really difficult situation around. So, like I said, Clallam County is looking, starting a grassroots movement now to try to see if we can get everybody on board to sign this. And so again, we will be asked to take a look at this charter and sign it at the end of this year. So I'd like to just kind of begin exploring it. It's a grassroots movement that's beginning now, and you'll probably be hearing more about it in a bunch of different groups. So that's what I want to say about compassion, the compassion charter. And then I want to apologize because I promised to get you that vacant building stuff. I finally did the research on it. There's a gazillion articles that I put up on our shared folder. And I promise you by the next think tank, I will have, and before the next think tank, I will get you the process to get us to a vacant building ordinance. One of the issues that I've noticed is that even defining what a vacant building is an issue, which I was like, oh my goodness. So defining the building code, there's a couple of folks who show solutions as to a land bank and how to deal with vacant property. So I will bring a decent analysis together so that we can move on forward with that vacant building. All right, so those were my items for think tank. Anything else that anybody would like to bring up about think tank? No? All right, let's move back to our agenda, guys.
So, short break.
Yes, let's take.
I'm going to, whether you're.
Okay, guys, let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back here at 8:23.
I'll wait till you come back. I have a feeling something.
Yeah, turn it off if you want to. Yeah. Okay.
All right, let's start the agenda from the top of take everything we have in here. Late items. Did I just catch you like that? All right, we'll skip that and come back to that. So we'll move to the ordinance not requiring council public hearing, which is the Wave Television Cable Franchise Ordinance Settlement and Franchise Agreement. It's going to have the second reading and
Madam Mayor, tonight staff is requesting the council conduct the second reading. You may recall at your last meeting, we did receive a detailed presentation from Sue Buskey. Again, we believe strongly that this is a great agreement for franchise for the city of Port Angeles, and we think it sets a really good tone. It achieves things that have not been achieved across the nation previously. So we're really appreciative of the hard work that everyone did to put this agreement together. It has been going on for quite some time, at least 3 years. The negotiations have been taking place, so we're very happy to bring it to conclusion. And ultimately, we're asking council to adopt the ordinance and approve the settlement agreement.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I am going to read the ordinance. An ordinance of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, authorizing and granting a television cable franchise to Wave Division 3, LLC. So, Council, any questions, any issues? Yes.
Thanks to staff for getting this done. Holy cow, this has been a really long effort. The most exciting information in this is on the bottom of page G1. Stability with the 10-year franchise, so council, it won't be on our guys again. So I fully support this.
Sounds wonderful. And I know that we do have to first approve and execute the attached franchise agreement. Did you have any comments?
I was just going to comment that I appreciate the work to increase the funding for local public access. And that's noted in the memo as $30,000 to $34,000 increase. So thank you to staff for advocating for that community organization.
So may I be clear on the steps we're taking? I believe this is a two-step process.
It is. First, we need to authorize the city manager to approve and execute the attached franchise agreement, which appears on...
Well, then I approve, then I will ask the council to approve and authorize the attached agreement.
So that's a motion?
That's a motion.
Second.
We have to authorize the city manager to approve.
And authorize, approve and authorize the city manager to execute the settlement?
No, to number one.
Back to number one, thank you. I'm trying to, it's getting late. I make a motion, I'm trying to, authorize the city manager to approve and execute the attached franchise agreement between the city of Port Angeles and Wave Division 3 LLC and make minor changes if required.
Second.
All right. So we've got a motion on the table in a second. Any further discussion?
I would just like to point out that Sue Buskey was extremely helpful in our last council meeting to kind of get our heads around this, because this is a complex legal document, and I appreciate the amount of time that it took to do this, but it seems like we have gotten a very good document before us, and I appreciate staff and using the Buskey group to do this, because it seems like it was well worth it.
Anything else? All right, so we've got a motion on the table. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so we've got the first motion. I've done the second reading of the ordinance, so we need now to adopt this. So council, how do you want to move forward?
I move that we approve and authorize the city manager to execute the settlement, compromise mutual recent claims, and make minor changes if required.
Number two.
Go to number
Madam Mayor, that's my bad, and that I mentioned 2 recommendations. There were actually 3. So there's the ordinance and then there's the settlement.
Oh, so we just took 2.
So we're just doing 2.
And see, it was complicated.
It
We're
is.
in Sherry's defense. That's the second. So I move that we approve the franchise agreement and adopt the ordinance.
Second.
Any further discussion on the motion? No? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Very Any opposed? So it passes unanimously.
I'll move to approve and authorize the city manager to execute the settlement, compromise and mutual release of claims, and make minor changes.
Oh, that was too easy.
I got you. Yeah, thank you for letting me do it.
All right, so we got another motion on the table and a second. Any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so this third one passes unanimously as well. Thank you, staff, for all the hard work on this, because I know this was a long haul. Okay, so back to our agenda to the very top. We will take on late items. Any late items that anybody would like to discuss?
I learned about a item that I think it would be good to address today, but we don't have to. I learned about it this afternoon at the Collin County Homelessness Task Force. There is a city government position on that task force. City of Forks is cycling off after 3 years, and Collin County is requesting that the city of Port Angeles have a representative on the Collin County Homelessness Task Force as well as an alternate. And it's for the next 3 years. It's a county resolution number 73 from 2014 that spells out these details. And the reason I'd like to bring this forward today is because the next Collin County Homelessness Task Force is in the afternoon on February 5th, which is also the same day as our city council meeting that evening. We could, do this later and not have a representative for that meeting. It's a once-a-month meeting, although they're talking about changing to quarterly.
So,
Nothing, I'm sorry. Something just occurred to me, and February 5th, my wife's birthday. I'm really going to be.
all right, guys. So, do we have interest? We have 4 folks who would like to discuss the homelessness task force representative.
So, I think it's worth taking a couple minutes if we can get someone to that meeting. But just a quick point of clarification, I'll wait until we decide if we're going to discuss it and then ask my clarifying question.
So, who would like to discuss this tonight? Raise your hand. Okay. So we've got enough to add it to the agenda. We'll add it under other considerations. All right. Thank you for that. So we will now move on to strategic plan for 2019-2020. So,
Madam Mayor, at your last council meeting on December 18th, we did have a work session looking at some of the details of the strategic plan. Staff has taken the time to sit down. Each individual department has sat down with the city manager to work through the items relative to timeframes and the metrics and measurables associated with that strategic plan. And ultimately, that document would be utilized to build the city work plan, which is a work in progress right now. So we have made a number of changes. Most of those have been worked through with Mayor Brooke. And at this point, we're ready to see council pass the resolution, if you're so willing, to adopt that strategic plan.
Council, so let me begin this discussion by reading the resolution. The resolution of the City Council of the City of Port Angeles, Washington, accepting the strategic plan for the year 2019 to 2020. So, any discussion on the strategic plan?
I'm going to vote to pass this resolution, but I must tell you, from my perspective, I was not really happy with the process that we went through to develop this strategic plan. I think what we came away with, rather than a strategic plan, is a shopping list. And so, having dealt with strategic planning and developing strategic plans for over 30 years, I'm not really thrilled with the product that came out of that planning session. My only hope is that we learn some things from that, and as we go forward in our next strategic planning session, a better product can be developed. Again, that's just my personal opinion, and on the way the session was conducted and the product that was the result of that session. But on the other hand, it's what we got, and it at least gives us some direction, so I will vote for the motion.
All right, any other comments?
Quick question, maybe Allison could answer. Demonstrating innovative and desirable urban design principles. Says who decides that? It doesn't, you don't have to answer that.
I'm waiting for my city manager, if you would like me to answer that.
I think either of us could probably answer it quite well, but I think if you looked at the prior version, there were some very specific suggestions made as to some concepts that have been around for quite some time, maybe were a little bit dated, and we felt it was better to be a little bit generic with that recommendation. However, I think relative to urban design, we do very much want to be innovative in this community. I think that's something council cares about, and there's a number of ways we can demonstrate that. If you follow that objective down to some of those actions, I think you'll see some of those actions actually put that to the test, and I think we'll have to demonstrate innovation as we move forward with that.
And he did remove like the new urbanism that has been around for forever. And there's items of some of those things that, for both of those things that were listed before, that I think we can still want, but it was, I think, an issue.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little.
Well, hang on.
I was just going to say, I am going to support this, but I concur with Councilmember Moran. I felt the strategic planning process was not as focused as I had hoped, and that was our final result.
So with regards to that first objective, new urbanism is still new to me. And I understand that it's not new. But I was excited to see it, but I also appreciate that we don't want to just put buzzwords or specific things. So I liked the wordsmithing there on that first objective, and I was happy that we got a good result.
So I'd like to speak, process-wise, we did use the same consultant 2 years ago, I guess, 2017 in the spring. And, maybe it was because that time we did, I think, a 2-day process, and this time we did a 1-day process. Maybe that was the difference that Councilmember is referring to. And then, I think with what Councilmember Moran is suggesting, we should think about this because we'll be doing this again in 2 years or a year and a half or something like that anyway. So let's think about what's working and what's not. I do feel like looking at the process from 2017 and then seeing that the actions and measures we did complete that, it might have been a bit like a shopping list, but it helped us to organize those into something. I'm welcome to, or I'm open to thinking of other ways to do it too, because I hate the shopping list concern. In regard to the objectives, I feel like demonstrating innovative and desirable urban design principles. I really did like the specific reference to specific principles before. So I guess my question is, if the references to those principles of smart growth, new urbanism, and maybe the other things that I should have learned about 5 years ago that everyone else knew about, if that's embedded in the goals and strategies, then I'm okay with taking those words out of objectives. But otherwise, I feel like being specific is better than saying innovative and desirable, because desirable is not a universally shared principle. I mean, as we've had discussions today, we've had multiple discussions about what our transportation system looks like, and that's very much an urban design principle. And what desirable means is not clear in that.
Would it help if we put in best practices? Because if those best practices continue to evolve, and like I said, new urbanism became one of the best practices of its time, and then, smart streets, all these other things become best practices. There are theories that continue, then they grow into policy, and then they get modified, and then they evolve to the next level of, whatever new label needs to go, but they are best practices in evolution.
Whose best practices? Are we talking about the National Highway Transportation Administration best practices for street design? Or are we talking about the city design manuals for design? I mean, whose best practices?
Right, so maybe because there is, so the planning committee, the planning community, especially urban designers, do have their best practices. And like I said, new urbanism used to be a best practice when I was in school, 20 years ago. So that's, we all moved into new urbanism, and then, form-based zoning, and all these things are best practices at some point, and then they kind of meld together. And now we come up with the next, whatever, and that's the reason why we kind of pulled it out. But innovative, desirable design principles, you're right, it's big, but you would want them based on best practices of the day.
So, my perspective is objectives are broad. We're talking about the biggest picture, and then we're going down. And when you get to actions and measures, that's when it talks about the American Institute of Architects Urban Design Study. So I think that we have in the plan a framework to which to, understand what that means in the objective.
That works for my concern. As long as we feel like those things that we had before under objectives in the first draft are embedded in goal strategies or perhaps actions.
You, just to clarify, you do find smart growth principles, which was one of the terms, and new urbanism within the actions of your strategic plan. So you are covered there.
Any other comments? So I only have one comment that, and that came out actually with a conversation, and I can't remember who it was with, dealing with form-based zoning. And so we have some stuff in here about form-based, and one of the things that they mentioned was form-based zoning that was actually attached to density. So they didn't, so that form-based zoning, as soon as a certain density was hit, there wasn't any need to kind of rezone the piece of property. It was the form-based zoning that hit it. Once it hit a certain density, it automatically kind of jumped. So where a house, so you didn't have to have specific zoning in place. You had the form-based zoning, and then different elements hit based on the density. So I thought that was kind of interesting, because at this point, you just do plain old form-based zoning. And so regardless of density. And so this one had kicked up different levels of regulations based on the density, which I thought was really smart. I'm like, wow, that was a great way of putting that, so that if you have a single family house and the next one becomes a fourplex, then there's higher standards for that fourplex based on the density. So it just seemed like it made more sense. But, so that would be the only modification, just to kind of explore that when the form-based zoning is pushed forward. That is it's on that first page, and it's at the very bottom under D, and it's number 3. So I just said tied with density. I don't know if that's something that's worth exploring or not, but I thought, what an innovative idea. So.
Madam Mayor, we can certainly add evaluating density relative to that form-based code item.
Yeah. So.
But I think we have density kind of in the goals.
Yeah.
So I mean, but it's a cool idea. I'm definitely intrigued by it. I'm going to read, but.
Yeah, I was intrigued by it. I just thought I had not seen it that way. All right. So, council, any other comments on this? So how do you want to move forward?
I move that we pass a resolution adopting the 2019-2020 strategic plan.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I also just want to second that, the process was difficult. I certainly left the room not feeling satisfied with my performance kind of as a council member, as a participant. But I think it was very worthwhile to go through, and I appreciated it. And I'm still thinking back to that day. So, I do think that going forward in the future, we should have some thoughts about the process.
And it might be, because having gone through both of them, maybe the 2-day thing really allows you to think and take space and then think again. And that, I desperately need that space to reflect. I just can't, if I'm off that day, well, at least gives you another day to kind of make up for that. So, so that I think maybe.
We've had a motion on the floor, though.
Right. So I was just going to comment on that. So, All right, any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right. So, on to other considerations. Equipment services, 2019 update.
All right, good evening, council. Tonight we'll be discussing the 2019 fleet purchasing outlook. So to give you a quick introduction, our goal tonight is to provide a comprehensive understanding of the fleet, maintenance, repair, and purchasing process. Throughout the presentation, if you have questions, feel free to ask them as we go through it. Either I or Brett will be able to answer those questions for you. So to manage our fleet, we have 200, equipment services as 223 units. This includes 66 construction and ground maintenance vehicles, 52 light-duty trucks, 31 medium or heavy trucks, 25 police patrol vehicles, 18 sedans, 16 standby generators, 9 fire suppression vehicles, 5 man-lift bucket trucks, and 1 bus, which is buses with the senior center. So in order to manage this fleet, we have 3 mechanics and 1 service writer. They perform the preventive maintenance, the safety inspections, major and minor repairs on the vehicles and equipment. Light-duty vehicles are serviced every 4,000 miles or every year. Heavy-duty diesel vehicles are serviced at 250 hours or 1 year. And then with our staff, we have a very talented staff out there that does metal fabrications and metal construction for a variety of different departments throughout the city. Our management staff for fleet, they establish the vehicle life cycles, which is evaluated every year. The department also works with, the division, the fleet division works directly with the directors of each department, and then also coordinates with finance for the budgeting of those vehicles and equipment. The management also writes the specifications for the new vehicles and equipment. They select the bidding process, whether it goes local or whether it goes on a state bid. We also drafted the council acquisition for approval, for the approval process, and then also they manage 2 fuel sites within the city limits. This includes negotiating out the low fuel pricing for each site. So I want to hand it off to Brian Coburn, the fleet manager, and he's going to be discussing tonight the vehicle replacement criteria. He's going to also go over the proposed 2019 vehicle equipment purchases, which you'll see in the future council meetings. We'll be discussing fuel usage and also the future fleet goals.
So we use 4 criteria to determine what vehicle we're going to replace. The first of which is the number of years of service. The number of years of service is determined by the equipment itself. Is it a critical piece of equipment, non-critical? Is it a pickup? Is it an emergency vehicle? Or is it a one kind of vehicle that we have here in the city? All of those factor into lifespan of the vehicle, as well as the current lifespan of the other vehicles in that department. That helps me come to the same number. The second criteria that we use is overall mileage of the vehicle. We use 100,000 miles as a benchmark for replacement of the vehicle. The third criteria is a life-to-date maintenance cost. And for that, we use 50% of the cost of a replacement vehicle as our benchmark. And the fourth criteria is departmental budget. Does that department or division have sufficient funds in their replacement fund to pay for the vehicle? All of that information combined will get us to a chart like this. And this is the 2019 proposed purchases. On the left here, we have all the different departments that we're proposing to place vehicles for. We have a description of the vehicles themselves, description of the replacement vehicles, miles or hours, depending on how we record it, the life-to-date maintenance costs, and the current budget amount. And if you look at the bottom of that column, you'll see that this year's budget will be just a little over $900,000. So, using that formula that I was speaking of, I'd like to draw your attention to the 3 police vehicles. This is a really good example of different ways that we determine what needs to be replaced. So the first vehicle, although all 3 of these vehicles fall within our 12-year lifespan, which is what we use for police vehicles, the first vehicle only has just a little over 100,000 miles on it. And its life-to-date costs have exceeded 50%, but not by far. The second vehicle has almost 150,000 miles on it. But its life-to-date maintenance costs are right at that 50% mark. And then the third vehicle, although it has less than 100,000 miles, its life-to-date maintenance costs are quickly approaching actual costs of the new vehicle. So all that information helps determine which vehicles we're going to want to replace this year. So I'd like to start with the police department. So for 2019, the police department replacement budget is $151,200. We're going to replace 3 vehicles with an average miles of 110,000, and all 3 of these vehicles will be replaced by identical Dodge Charger patrol vehicles.
Can I ask questions? What would it?
Yeah, by all means.
So, I understand that replacing, you want the same types of cars so that you can kind of keep the fleet, together, but would it make more sense to start looking at electric vehicles? Would it start making sense to look at hybrids so that as we move forward into that, trying to reduce our footprint, that maybe that's...
And we do, and actually we'll address that a little more towards the end of places where we can do that.
So who do we purchase our new vehicles from?
It depends on what vehicle we're purchasing. In this case, these are purchased right off the state contract, and it's a dealership that's in Seattle.
Sorry, can I interrupt with another question? Could you go back one slide to the chart? I guess I assume, and this is just my lack of familiarity with vehicle maintenance, but that there's a correlation between the miles of a vehicle and the total maintenance cost of the vehicle. I assume those things to be correlated, that the more you drive the vehicle, the more you're going to spend maintaining the vehicle, and that they tend to trend evenly. The 3 examples given at the top, particularly the second 2 police vehicles, totally don't follow that trend. Am I mistaken about the trend, or is there more going on there? With
No, you're not mistaken about the trend, but at times, maybe we have a good vehicle that hasn't given us any problems, and so we've been able to stay away from major repairs. And so when we get to this point, and we can see that kind of mileage, and we haven't had to spend a lot of money on it, that definitely is the time to get rid of it before we face those increased costs.
And then what about the third one that, it's significantly higher cost than the first 2 with a lot fewer miles?
The same effect isn't true. Perhaps that vehicle had more problems than the second one. And so it's cost us more money to maintain that vehicle at this point. And although we have kept this vehicle possibly too long, and our costs now have increased to the point of almost the cost of a new vehicle, there's more to whether or not we can replace this vehicle this year or last year, depending on other vehicles that were replaced prior to this. So we have to look at the whole complete fleet of police to determine which 3 vehicles we can replace this year. And in this case, this vehicle was pushed from last year to this year.
And I'd just like to make a comment that, as we look at level of service, so now he's just stated the level of service for vehicles is 100,000 miles, and the level of service for a vehicle is 12 years. So some of these things that we talk about when we're setting level of service for our fleet, we have them. And so I'm just mentioning it so that we can start grabbing these level of service items for us to continue to.
Brian, can I add one thing real quick? The level of service is actually, as Craig pointed out there, it's in CFP as well. So all the years for those vehicles, they're not assigned equally across the board. It goes by the division. Brian's going to talk a little more about how it's assigned later on there. And also, I want to touch on when we go to select, whether it's local or state, we do work with our local dealerships as well. Where we can buy inside city limits. That we definitely focus on that as well. So, whatever.
So we covered the police vehicles. So next is the fire department. The 2019 vehicle replacement budget for the fire department is $71,000. We're replacing 2 vehicles for the fire department this year. The first of which is a 2006 sedan that has approximately 71,000 miles on it. It would be replaced by a 2019 4x4 SUV. At a replacement cost of $38,000.
Okay, so I know that we had talked about before as to vehicle creep. Whether at some point, whether this sedan was doing the job and we really just need a sedan, but we really would rather have a 4x4. We have to try to, like I said, that was one of the things I know that we had to be careful of.
Exactly.
So, I just, so I guess the justification for it.
So currently, this vehicle in its form doesn't meet the needs of the department. And so, as you'll see in the next slide, excuse me, sorry, let's just skip along. All right, back up. The other vehicle for the fire department that we're replacing is a 2004 4x4 SUV. It has just over 110,000 miles on it. It also would be replaced by an identical 2019 4x4 SUV. So we would be purchasing two identical vehicles that also help streamline the idea of the fleet and the parts inventory and familiarity with vehicles. So it goes hand in hand to replace vehicles and trying to keep them in standardization. And so that's why, partially the reason why we looked at replacing that vehicle with an SUV as well. Rather than having three different vehicles within their admin vehicles, if I can make all three of them exactly the same, that helps them and us both.
I don't mean to push too much on this, but I mean, the idea of vehicle creep, well, I mean, we kind of just did it. Like, why do we go from the sedan to the SUV so that we have two SUVs and not go down to two sedans? And I think it would save cost and, potentially fuel efficiency as well.
Can I address that a little bit? I agree 100%. We do address vehicle creep. We've been doing this. I mean, the vehicle creep issue's been brought up through previous city managers. And we've had a lot of focus on that over the years on how to address this. This one in particular is one that we had to put a lot of thought into when we worked with Ken and his staff firsthand on how we want to tackle this one. And when it was actually pushed off, it was actually in the 2018 budget, we pushed it in 2019 just because we wanted to do further evaluation on it. Based on that, the purpose over in fire is moving in a different direction, so they want to get a multi-purpose vehicle. We want to also standardize, which is great. They have the budget for it. We anticipated replacing this with SUVs originally, so that was the whole purpose of it. Back when we purchased the sedan, it was used for something totally different. And that's, we address this creep, and we're trying to also, and we'll get a little bit more into it, but not only address creep, but we're also trying to consolidate our fleet as well. And we'll talk about how we want to modernize our fleet and also actually consolidate it. So those are big things that we talk about internally. Nathan's definitely tied into it. It's across the board throughout the departments. We put a lot of attention to how we select these vehicles. And this is for us, the two vehicles for fire, they're probably the most challenging ones going back and forth, just because we do have the sedan, and then this one here, and Brian will probably speak to a little bit, but that'll be repurposed also for the community paramedic program that they're going to be implementing.
So this vehicle actually will be staying within the fleet for the next year.
Well, and I know Brian has had a lot of experience fixing different vehicles, and I personally feel it is important to stay with the same vehicle, same parts, same oil filters, same fuel filters. The mechanic knows exactly what he's looking at when he looks at the thing. There's a reason why a lot of companies out there buy the same trucks. They buy the same vehicles. I can go in the shelf and grab a part off the shelf and know that that fits any one of those trucks out in the parking lot. And it makes it that much faster to not have to look around and try and find a part from the dealer somewhere.
So that covers the fire department then. Move on to Parks and Recreation. The 2019 vehicle replacement budget for Parks and Recreation is $91,000. We're proposing to replace a 2004 flatbed truck. It has over 160,000 miles on it with a 2019 flatbed truck at a budget replacement cost of $9,400. The second vehicle for Parks and Recreation is a 2004 van. It has almost 100,000 miles on it. It will be replaced with the 2019 at a budget replacement cost of $41,600. Next, we move on to Public Works. The 2019 Public Works replacement budget is $599,600. Start with the street division. We're proposing to replace a 1990 dump truck with a dump truck. This vehicle has almost 5,000 hours on it at a budget replacement cost of $156,000.
And is that vehicle capable of doing the same snow plow?
It will be, yes. Yes. You can see the snowplow attachment on the front of the old truck. So.
Correct, that isn't seen on front of the.
No, this is just a representation of what we'd be replacing with. But yes, it will have all the capabilities of that truck. Next is the Light Operations Division. We're proposing to replace a 1999 bucket truck that has over 7,000 hours on it with a 2019 bucket truck at a budget replacement cost of $275,600. Also in the Light Operations Division, we're proposing to replace a 2007 4x4 pickup. It has nearly 140,000 miles on it with a 2019 4x4 pickup at a replacement cost of $36,400. Excuse me. In the Water Division, we're proposing to replace a 1985 portable air compressor that has approximately 1,300 hours on it at a budget replacement cost of $26,000. Currently in our fleet, we have 2 of these units, one in streets and one in water. With the purchase of this new unit, we can surplus both and just keep one unit. So it would suffice for both.
Has there ever come a time when you need 2?
Very rarely. And if so, we do have the ability to borrow one from the county.
Okay.
In the wastewater division, we're proposing to replace a 2001 Dodge service truck, a service truck. It has just over 100,000 miles on it. Its budget replacement cost is $62,400, and we replace it with a 2019 service truck. In the solid waste division, we're proposing to replace a 2004 pickup truck. It has just over 113,000 miles on it. Its budget replacement cost is $45,800, and it would be replaced by a 2019 4x4 pickup.
Can I jump in again? Again, my ignorance on vehicle purchases and lifetime cost savings, but I've often heard that you're better off not driving a new vehicle off a lot because you lose a significant amount of the vehicle's value than when you do. Why are we buying new vehicles when it's something like this, where it's a pickup truck that we could get 1 or 2 years used, probably for a lot less of that cost?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Why are we buying new vehicles at, the new vehicle cost and not buying a 1 or 2 year, generally used, so to speak, vehicle? I mean, I think there's a lot of different theories about how to buy vehicles and save money overall, but I mean, a lot of people say don't buy a new car, buy one that's been, used but not used roughly for a couple of years, and then you're going to save a lot more cost overall. Is that wrong, or do we just like new vehicles?
So my experience with buying used vehicles, especially since having worked for the city of Port Angeles, it does not work out. We have bought a number of used vehicles, and ultimately they cost us twice the amount of money in maintenance because you purchased somebody else's problem, and they've gotten rid of it for a reason. It's not just because they're tired of it after 2 years. So, from my point of view, I do not want a used vehicle because that's going to increase everything that I have to do. So that concludes actually all the vehicles for this year. I'd like to talk a little bit about our fuel. The city has been using biofuel since 2012. Biofuel, of course, is diesel fuel with biofuel mixed, and we purchase the mixed fuel. The city's annual fuel usage is 100,000 gallons, split evenly between gas and diesel. Of that 50,000 gallons a year of diesel, 95% of that is biofuel, with an exception of the fire department where we do not burn bio there. We burn straight diesel down there. And to answer your question about hybrid vehicles, we currently have 2 in the fleet. We are in the process of purchasing a third for the pool vehicle. We are looking in the future at buying more as we can apply them to the situations where we can use them. And the same is true about the electric vehicles as well. So moving forward.
Could you touch?
Sorry?
Oh, maybe you're going to get to that. I was just going to say if you could touch quickly on old diesel versus new diesels.
You're referring to?
Sissy was talking about, environmentally friendly vehicles and
So
With clean burn and.
absolutely with clean burn, and the exhaust systems being what they are today, have reduced emissions by a ton. So the new diesels today are considered clean burn. And so if you buy a new vehicle today with a diesel engine, that is considered, and use biodiesel, that's considered green fuel. So that meets the requirements of trying to move forward with green fuel.
And do we have a depth tank, or we just have a gallon?
No, we do. We actually have it's about a 250 gallon container with a pump that all vehicles can just pull up to a door and fill up. Because I would estimate we probably have 25 vehicles now that use DEF.
So I feel like that's a really huge piece of statistic that needs to be kind of broadcast. So how much fuel and how much footprint we spend a day, and with our new vehicles, how much that's going to be. If it is a clean burn, that we can show the citizens that we are using your money, and now we have reduced our CO2 emissions by X amount. And a lot of cities are quantifying this and trying to move to zero emissions, or, all these things. And so this is part of making sure that we quantify that, so we can actually quantify where we're at and where we're moving forward.
Council, let me just share with you, I think those are really important issues, and we know those are important to council, and that's one of the reasons that you saw in the spreadsheet, basically a benchmarking, so that we know where we are today with those miles per gallon. And I think Brian can probably share too, if you look at the overall gain relative to miles per gallon savings that we're generating with each of these purchases, for the most part, I think there's one exception. It's a substantial gain at the end of the year relative to overall fuel consumption. And I think it's just important that council be aware that's something we're looking at. And ultimately, this spreadsheet, I think, is a good example of how we can begin benchmarking the program as it exists today, knowing that we're trying to improve towards the future.
So one of the things that we had already talked about was consolidation of the fleet or streamlining the fleet. Every opportunity that we have, we consider, is the vehicle that we're going to purchase can be used by multiple departments. We have some of those now. We're always reviewing that and trying to incorporate that as we can. To that point, this vehicle that you see here on the slide, this is what is considered a swap loader. This is an idea that we are contemplating moving into eventually, because this truck can be used to not only be a dump truck, but you could get a water tank on the back of that, a flatbed, a sander, any number of units can be attached to the back of that truck. So with a couple of chassis, you can service 5-6 different applications. And again, we're also looking at trying to purchase eco-friendly vehicles. If we can purchase a hybrid vehicle that will suffice for our needs, then it's definitely a consideration. When you're talking about electric vehicles, we are actually looking at a future plan to replace some of the meter reader vehicles, perhaps, with electric vehicles. But in order to do that, we need to look at infrastructure first and get charging stations installed, so we've got somewhere to charge those vehicles once we have them. And then the last thing is an addition of a fuel station. During the recent storm that we had here and the power outage, we found that we don't really have enough capacity in the ground of our own fuel. We have two 6,000 gallon tanks at the courtyard. Of course, with a 6,000 gallon tank, you can only fill about 5,400 gallons. Fortunately for us, we had just gotten fuel the day before that took place, so we were as full as we could be. But if we had been without power for several days and having to go out and fuel our own generators to keep everything running, we would quickly run out of fuel. So that's the consideration that we need to keep in mind in case we have another natural disaster of some kind, so that we can suffice and take care of our own equipment. And as well as that, we, in equipment services, we need to come up with a better form of being able to transport that fuel, because currently we can only move about 100 gallons at a time. So we're also working on that plan. So.
And I would think that, I'm thinking with the climate change, or even the storm water and shoreline master plan, some of these things become critical to running those generators to make sure that the pump stations are running, the sewage, and I mean all of those things, and water. So I would think that this that addition of another fuel station becomes really critical for us to add to our work plan.
To consider. Are there any other questions?
I heard that during the power outage, most of the gas stations weren't able to pump fuel. So I'm just wondering what the thought was with us adding more fuel capacity just dedicated for ourselves versus helping to ensure that more of the fuel that's already here is available and potentially having priority access to it for government emergency services. Did we consider other options other than just adding a new fuel tank for ourselves?
So during that storm, we did find out two things. One of the things was that the new station out there, the LWA station, they have their own emergency generator. So they were able to continue to fuel vehicles. And they have they have recently put in a CFN fueling island out there, which is the system that we use outside of our own fueling station at the courtyard. So if you take an out-of-town vehicle, you're going to be using a CFN card. So there is some availability there. Though that's something that we need to investigate and talk with them and see just exactly what they have and what would be available. I also found out that the CFN at Carlsberg is also generator run. So there is fuel available there, but that is some run to go down there and pack 500 gallons at a time back and forth trying to service our needs.
Now you talk about what the LY gas station looked like.
Yeah, well, you kind of hope you don't have to sit in that line, because it was
Two
all the way
fuel
out on the
tankers
highway.
stuck in the middle of the whole mass, and it was lined up all the way down the highway.
But there is possibly some other avenues besides just our own that we could explore.
And the Jamestown store worked also, and they do a CFN card will work at those pumps.
But those two stations are so far away that for us to logically carry fuel back and forth, it's gonna be difficult.
The LWA was probably, I bet it was an hour wait at least to get fuel there.
Well, that's because none of the other gas stations had fuel or were able to pump. I mean, we're talking about, there's fuel on the ground, but we just need a generator which is run by fuel, to pump the fuel out of the ground. There's a feedback loop here that's really easy to close. And I'd like to see us plan, or at least help the other gas stations plan for that, so that the LS station doesn't have an hour-long line, and considering having that also with their fuel for their own operations.
We do have the ability at the courtyard to hook up a generator to my building, which does afford us to be able to operate the fuel system there. So we do have that covered.
So, because this is in the future plan, it seems relevant, and I know this is one of the advantages of, at least my perception, the departments work really well collaboratively, is that if we can move forward on and I may be misinterpreting this a little bit, but I feel like in a situation like what you're describing, and like we saw, there was also an offer from the county, does the city need fuel? We have fuel, we can get it to you. So the more we can work toward a consolidated EOC, I think that can help address some of this, having that running concurrently with the future plans for our fueling, and what would that look like in a disaster. I think that's an important piece for us to just consider or keep in mind, just maybe think of it.
Just one other note there, Column Transit is also currently thinking about redoing its fuel system or infrastructure for storing fuel, so there might be the opportunity for collaboration there.
I was going to mention, we did talk with Long Transit in regards to that, so that's still ongoing, but that's very early on in one of the phases, but they did mention that to us.
And like I said, my only other, and I know that you guys, there's probably some reason for that 100,000 mile cutoff. I'm just, I would love to have a new vehicle every 100,000 miles, right? And knowing that I've driven cars, close to 300,000 miles, so it just, I'm sure that, like I said, there's a good reason for that. And so I just wonder, whether should it be 110, 120, or is there scientific reasoning, especially for the new vehicles? Should they be kept long, or should they be kept small, less amount of time?
So no one of those criteria is
Right.
the reason why we replace the vehicle. Combinations of those criteria. So when a vehicle comes up with 100,000 miles, that just flags it for me to start paying attention to that vehicle. If its costs are still low, if the mileage is still low, then we're going to keep it in the fleet longer. It's just a benchmark in which to start guiding us to say, okay, this is a vehicle we need to pay attention to. And that's true about all 4 criteria. All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. Okay, so moving on, the authorized sale of the surplus property located between Lordson Boulevard and 6th Street. Is this Allison?
I was so just entertained by that last presentation, I forgot it was being next.
No problem.
Okay, so essentially, this is returning back to you after we have declared this property as surplus property. We move forward on the request of council to do the advertisements as recommended, and that was the adjacent neighbors. Advertising, and also in the paper, advertising occurred, and we received 0 additional responses. So staff is recommending at this time that we move forward to accept the original offer by the Burkharts for this particular property.
All right, council, any discussions? Let's start with Sheriff.
I feel like we've discussed this thoroughly, so I move to authorize the city manager to sell the property to Mr. and Mrs. Burkhart on the terms stated in this memo.
Second.
All right, so we got a motion on the table in a second. So let's continue with discussion. I think.
Well, I was just, Sissy and I were just chuckling because we have basically the same thing drawn on our thing, which is, hey, have a little sidewalk right there. But I just also want to note, because it was a concern raised during our previous conversation, so I appreciate that it was delineated for us here, that there will still be access, not necessarily in the form of a sidewalk, but the property line still allows access between 6th Street and Lauritzen, and that was something that was important to people, so I just wanted to note that for the record, that that's still maintained, so, or that it is maintained, even with the sale of the property.
And the one thing that I wanted to, since it's the same issue, is that I want something to state that this is still, like I said, people didn't know that they could cross that. People didn't know that this was a public access. So I think that we need a little sign there, just saying, you know, we need the pedestrian access from that end of the street, because to get to Lordson Boulevard from 8th Street, I mean from 6th Street, you have to go all the way around. And especially when it's just right there, it makes sense that we have something that signifies to people that it's not private property, it's not all private property, and that they can go through. So that's, I think, the one issue that, so, Chip.
Forgive me, but the accountant in me would like to know how much it cost us to advertise the public, to the public by publishing a notice in the local paper, posting the property, and notifying the neighbors. Any idea?
We were not tracking staff time specifically, council member. I can tell you an average cost for any public notice in the paper is between $75 to $100.
Just curious.
Just, and I would just like to clarify that it's just illegal.
Staff time?
Staff time, posting, I would say, dealing with the applicant, you know, we probably average between my own time, our city attorney's time, and a couple of my staff members, there were a few hours spent. I would average about 15.
Okay.
I know you raised that at the last, when we brought this up before, and I think at least my recollection is the majority of us said we felt like the process being transparent and very clear was more important than whether or not we ended up breaking even, or even if it cost us a little bit of money. So I appreciate the question because I'm sure we got close, but
Taxpayer dollars.
All right. Any other comments?
I do think process is important, as we kind of heard the first half hour of our meeting today. And so thank you for noticing it and letting the neighbors know about the government sale of property near them.
So I just want to get back to, like I said, our drawing of the space that's available there. People don't know that they can cross there. So I just want to know how we can let people know that they can cross there.
Madam Mayor, my concern would be that we probably have hundreds of similar situations across the city, and I think as a city we have a responsibility to be consistent. And at this point, we don't have a known indication that we have either an interest in pedestrian traffic crossing in this location or an actual pedestrian use of that location. I do think it's important to be aware of it in the future, but we have right-of-way situations throughout our community where we don't sign them. And if we begin the process of signing it, I just worry about setting that precedent. If that's important to council, we can look at some options and suggestions of how we could do that. But I just would caution about consistency, making sure we're being consistent across the board.
Right, and you know what, I think it's rising to the level of concern, at least for me, because we are, again, trying to make this a more walkable community, and a simple sign that tells people, oh, this isn't all private property, and that we can cross here is important, and maybe and since we haven't done it before, and there's a lot of places like this that could make this even a more walkable community, maybe coming up with a simple little bollard or maybe a little sign that says, you know, that indicates that you're allowed to cross this piece of property. I think we need to delineate somehow.
I'll say from my personal experience in walking half the city in 2017, I was there at the end of 6th Street, and I looked at that, I said, that would be a lot faster to get back to my car, but I don't really want to cut across somebody's property when I just asked them for my vote, so I'm going to walk around, and I wish that I'd known that that was just city property. And that was the only area where I had that issue in half of the town. So there's a personal experience, I love the sign. I also wonder if we're going to have to survey and reassess those parcel lines, given that we're keeping a significant portion of that, and if we're going to be out there on site anyway, then it makes sense to spend a little bit of additional time and make it clear that there's pedestrian access from 6 doors and things.
So, Alexa, I just would like to ask staff to please start looking at this. I think it's important, I really do.
We do have a motion on the table about the sale of the property, not the walkable community.
It's true, but it deals with the sale of this parcel to make sure that
it is not in the memo.
Councilmember, if you're calling the question, just call the question.
As politely as I can, could we please call the question?
Let's call the question. Any further discussion on this? No? All right. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. All right, guys. So, we are now on to the Collin County Homelessness Task Force. So who would like to, I guess, participate in this? We should ask for interest.
I express interest.
Okay, so we have Mike French. Who else expressed interest in serving in this committee?
I'd be interested, but I don't have time, so I'll defer to people who do.
Okay. I would be interested as well, but I would actually defer because of him as well. So, but I could be a backup if needed to be. And Lindsay, are you interested in serving in this?
I've been attending not as a member, but I've got a pretty good understanding of a lot of what that group does at this point, so I'm very happy having other council members be official on that committee, and knowing that somebody from this body is there makes a difference. I also mentioned Jason Vieta from the police department sits as the law enforcement representative, so there's another city staff person there as well. So I if Mike and Sissy are willing to, I'm totally happy not volunteering myself.
You have to volunteer for backup if you want to. So,
You should do that.
okay. Any other discussion? Anybody else would like to participate in this? No? So then, do we need a motion to assign somebody?
And Mayor, I would encourage a motion.
Yeah. I move that we appoint Mike French as the council representative to the Clallam County Homelessness Task Force and Sissy Brooke as the alternate.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Just to ask Lindsay to please remind me of the next day of the meeting.
The next date is February 5th, which is Tuesday, 2:30 to 4 p.m., and it meets in the courthouse basement in the Emergency Operations Center.
So, no further discussion? So, okay, we have a motion on the table. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. All right, we have no purchasing council reports. Let's start with Jim.
Okay, it's been a bit of a while since the last council meeting, and a number of things have come up. I'm just going to hit some of the highlights for me. Last Saturday, I attended the Community Players Gala, and our little Community Players Playhouse there up on Lordson is 66 years old, and they had a fundraising gala on Saturday night, and well attended, and they raised enough money to put a new lighting system in, and are looking forward to their 67th year. So that was really a lot of fun. I also, along with Sherry and Kate, attended at the Junior Ambassadors evening. That was not only a lot of fun, a very emotional evening with the Japanese exchange students that had come and stayed with the families for 4 days, and by the emotions in the room, you thought they had been there for 4 years. But having hosted exchange students for over 12 years, I certainly understood what was going on in that room, and I appreciate the opportunity to attend that meeting, and that was something that I would encourage us to support. And Mike, I was the ice skating rink manager for a week. My wife and I were the ice skating rink managers for the final week of the ice skating rink, 8 hours a day, and with the help of Janet and Bill Atkinson, with half of our shift, we would not have been able to survive those shifts there. And we thank Bill, you and your wife, for helping us get through that week of ice skating rink managers. As a manager, you're responsible for everything that goes on in the rink. Tickets, skates, monitoring, and I have to tell you, there's some pros and cons, but on balance, I can't remember the number of smiles and good times people are having. And let me ask you, Mike, when was the last time you saw almost 600 people downtown Port Angeles on Saturday night?
Not in December. No.
In December. So, on balance, it was a great experience. As you saw the numbers, 14,000 people skated on the ice, and on Saturday night, I felt all 14,000 over there, like Bill. But it was a great experience, and I'm looking forward to doing it again in November. And I was amazed. It did draw people. I talked to people from Victoria, from Port Townsend, from Bremerton, and the people in Victoria, the lady I talked to was envious of us having that rink there. They had one in front of the Empress Hotel for a number of years, and they don't do it anymore. So there was a whole contingent of people from Canada that came over on the Cove just to skate. And so that was really, really a tiring week, but a rewarding week, and I look forward to the next year's Ice Village. Thank you.
And it really can't be said enough how much that event was supported by volunteer hours, and wouldn't have been possible without it. I actually just attended the Chamber of Commerce retreat the other day, Friday, I believe, and that's one of the things that comes up, is we want to make sure we're not getting volunteer fatigue, because we're asking a lot from people, and they're volunteering very generously for hours, and so that was one of the things that's going to be, hopefully, stuff that's on our minds for the next year. So yesterday, I attended the Olympic Peninsula Tourism Commission work session over in Swim with Allison Brown. We had some really good discussions. One of the things that we spent a little bit of our time talking about is how do we engage our marketing messages with our local business community? How do we get a consistency between the marketing message and the product that we're delivering? That's something that's always on my mind. We had a great presentation from Vertigo, who's doing a fantastic job, who I think is absolutely worth the money we're spending, but we want to make sure that we're having a consistent product, when the visitor gets here, that they're getting what we're showing. And I think a lot of times we're doing a great job, and it's not always as consistent as I think it used to be. And so I'm not sure, the OPTC people have, a little bit of that conversation about how do we deliver some of those best practices to our business community? How do we get them to engage in social media and in all these new technologies? And that's still an open question. We've had that same conversation in the Chamber of Commerce, and it's something that, I think that we need to take seriously as a community, that our business community, one of the things that we don't have in Port Angeles is we don't have a large degree of corporatization. We have a lot of sole proprietors, we have a lot of just family businesses that don't have a staff that markets, that has a corporate chain that, engages their marketing messages. And so it's a lot of people just doing it themselves. It's the way my business runs, and it's difficult and stressful, and you don't always do things the right way. And so that's something that's been on my mind when we talk about citywide marketing. We have to make sure that that product is there, because otherwise we'll get them once and then they'll never come back. And we want to make sure people come back and they spend their money here in Port Angeles, and they come back and they tell their friends, because I think that we have a lot of potential for that. I also went to the Port Angeles Downtown Association. They had a board meeting where they actually had a good quorum, and they had some good discussion, and we talked about bylaw revisions. And so I'm not sure what the future of the Port Angeles Downtown Association holds, but one of the people that I'm going to try to get involved who has a great vision for downtown is Chris Fiddler at the Waterfront Center, to try to see what direction downtown needs to, because downtown needs to have a vision. There's going to be millions of dollars of investment, public and private, going into downtown over the next few years, and so I want to make sure that we have a consistent vision, so again, we have that amazing product that we can deliver. And I, on my council report, I have written down Minneapolis2040.com, because it's really an impressive thing that, I just also want to, it's a beautiful website, and I also want to caution that our comprehensive plan is not going to look like the city of Minneapolis is. They're a huge, big city with tons of resources, and we just don't have it. But, the distillation of how they did away with single-family zoning is they just basically allowed duplexes and triplexes in all residential areas. And if you just go to their website and click around for a little bit, it's a really interactive thing, and you can kind of, I think that it represents a different kind of vision in city planning that is really committed to actually doing what some of these, lofty words say. And it's an impressive thing that I think that, not everything, again, big cities are not a rural town in a rural county. We're not the same, and that, that's something that it's been a learning curve for me to understand, that I can't just cookie cut what I read about in some urban thing, blog onto Port Angeles, and it's going to fix all our problems. We're going to have different problems, and they're going to present differently, but I think there's a lot to learn from there. So yeah, it was a really great break. I felt like I kind of had a little vacation from city council, but I was really ready to come back, and so I appreciate that. So thanks.
So I guess in the ideal of government or democracy, we blur the lines between the people and their government. I mean, that's the idea, right? People power, democracy, and that people feel like they're part of the government, actually that people own their government. I want to respond to the comments we heard at the beginning of our meeting and say I don't think we achieved anything close to that with the decision by city staff on January 3rd. And I expect better, a lot better. I don't understand what the exigent circumstances were that warranted just a weird process. And I met the neighbors and their 3-year-old and 5-year-old, and I mean, we failed the don't make little kids cry test for good government. So that's my concern there. On to other things. I did meet with a local Boy Scout who had contacted the council, and we talked about homelessness and homelessness policy and what the city can do for about an hour. It was really fun. I also was able to attend the traffic safety committee, and I want to thank Manager West and Director Burke and Jonathan Bohm and the others involved in that for allowing me to sit in on the traffic safety committee. It gave me a much better understanding of how that process works, and I appreciate that. Also want to thank Ryan Herring, who's a realtor with Windermere. He's the new president of the Ordinance Realtors Association. He invited the council to come and speak to the association about the multifamily tax exemption. And Councilmember French and I presented and discussed the policy proposal last Thursday. There were 50 people there, so Ryan had organized a very successful event because that's more than they usually have. Also, I was able to sit down with the staff of the Waterfront Center, and I want to thank them for taking the time to update me on the project. They said that they're really interested in talking to everyone else in the council, so if you haven't had a chance to talk to them, Sherry Curran helped to set up that meeting, and I imagine would do so as well. I was really excited to see how that project's developing with integration of the site with the Marine Center and the Tribes Longhouse. There's a couple other things, Carrie, we had a chance if you could put that projector up. I wanted to share a couple of articles or things I've come across recently about urban design, because they relate to some of the topics we've been talking about. But maybe while that's coming up. The Peninsula Planners Forum in Squim this Friday, I imagine. Thursday, not Friday. Okay. I just want to see if any other council members are planning on attending. It's the Department of Commerce, the Association of Washington Planners, or Washington Planners Association, and the American Planning Association. I keep looking to Director Becky because she can probably explain it better than I can. But
It's the Peninsula Planners Forum, which is the kind of very regional group of our greater Washington APA. And it's on Thursday, and it is in Slim.
Is that open to folks to go?
yeah, the advertisement from Department of Commerce says for elected officials.
Yeah, I believe Councilmember is right that they have partnered with Commerce this particular forum, and it's listed as 9 o'clock to 3.
And one of the reasons I bring it up is on the agenda, most of the conversation is about climate change through addressing climate change adaptation through comprehensive planning. And so there's several sessions related to that. So I think I might have read the announcement when I thought it was Friday. So if it's Thursday, I'm probably not planning on attending, but if somebody else is able to, that'd be great.
And just to clarify, I'm sending 2 of my staff members to attend.
So I want to share, this is a website I came across, again, that's Sustainable Transportation Planning book by Jeffrey Tomlin. And this website, Urban Advantage, looks at different urban situations and how different amenities can help to improve their aesthetic. We've been talking about form-based code and about use-based code and what the difference is. And this is one example from this website that illustrates aspects of historic preservation, walkability, transforming a neighborhood. So that image is kind of the starting point. And filling in with similar form buildings, adding amenities like trees and pedestrian design, lighting, helps to transform that street from what's I wouldn't quite call it blighted, but is impaired in a lot of ways. And there's, I think, a lot to learn from these visual images on this website. So if folks are interested, definitely check out some of the other ones. There's some that deal with commercial and some that deal with residential as well. The other thing I want to show is that other tab up there, but I'm trying to figure out if I should just run up. I guess I'll do it. This is a recent article from Strong Towns, and it's talking about traffic safety. And the main part of it is around the psychology of traffic safety and driving. And there's two pictures there. The above one, is theoretically 20 miles per hour, but you're not going to drive 20 miles per hour down it. But the idea of it is that you build, kind of space that people can, you can make mistakes. You can see the kid running out of the driveway chasing the bouncing ball, so to speak, and you have time to stop. But what a lot of kind of, transportation psychologists say is, well, when you've got that extra wiggle room, you just go faster. And when we think about speed related to pedestrian fatalities, going faster is not going to make it safer. The bottom picture is in many ways very problematic from a transportation perspective. So there's no sidewalks. If you're walking, you're probably going to be walking in the street. But you're probably going to drive down that more like 20 miles per hour. And part of that has to do with the lack of visibility at the cross streets, provided by trees, provided by other barriers near the intersection. So it's an illustration. There's more discussion about it in the article on Strong Towns. But when we're talking about traffic and aspects like parking and the idea, well, parking on the street, makes it narrow and less safe, not necessarily, because it helps to say, you can't go fast down this road, and speed is one of the main things that doesn't lead to safe streets when we're talking about urban neighborhoods. So I want to share that and encourage folks to read that article. I tested this theory over on A Street last week, and I won't say what speed was comfortable driving because there's a law enforcement officer in the room, but it was not the miles posted.
All right, Kate?
I'll just give a couple of quick things. So we actually, my kids and I were a host family for one of the Japanese students. It was the junior ambassadors from Witsu City. It's a middle school group, and they really do only stay 4 days. And it's just an interesting and fun experience, and I'm glad we were able to do it. And the only other thing that I wrote down that I wanted to ask is if Jim is going to get involved with the Rams. Go back to some of your basketball days.
I haven't been asked yet.
I might be able to make that happen.
By the way, just as an aside, just to answer your question, I will be broadcasting the Port Angeles High School North Kitsap basketball game on Friday night, so I do have an alternate career.
Okay. All right, Mike?
Well, I can hardly remember what I did this morning, but my daughter went ice skating a couple times. I know that. I was down there, watched her. That's not my thing. I have to get up and go to work in the morning, and I need both my legs to do that. So, although she told me how easy it was, take her word for it. So I wanted to kind of touch on the randomness of life, and you never know somebody until you really talk to them, and people judge people so quickly. I had a customer of mine lived out by Joyce, and I first saw this guy, I thought, Lord, does he even own this wood, let alone, am I gonna haul it for him? And we kind of figured out how to get him somewhere where I could move him. He didn't have a lot of money to get anything done, and he was kind of in a pinch, so we got figured out enough to get some wood out of there so we could start making some money. And I got to know the guy, and a very interesting guy, and he had a pretty troubled younger life, and in and out of drugs, and he had cleaned himself up, and he actually spent the majority of his time traveling around to different conventions helping other people. And again, you're looking at the guy. And the pure just randomness of life. I learned, well, the day that it happened, but he was from Port Angeles. They listed him as from Oregon, but he passed away at the Quina Bar down in Oregon. And it was very sad to see this guy that completely turned his life around to help others, and then to be gone at such a young age. I don't know if it was in the paper or not, but just to see how fast life can disappear from you, and just everybody, you talk about safety crossing this, the crosswalk, and it's just it's important that, number one, you never know who your neighbor is till you get to know them. Because just because you look over there, you may have a prejudgment on them, that may not be who they are. And number two, never take life for granted. And number three, make sure that you get out there and live it. This guy got out there and he lived life, and that was Josh Porter. He did not sit on the bench.
I had the honor and privilege of welcoming, as other council members did, our friends from Mutsu. So that's been over 20 years we've had that mutual friendship with Mutsu. So this month it was middle school students, and then in October it's the high school students. And I've been doing that ever since I was first on the council in 2008, and then I had an opportunity to represent Port Angeles and go to Mutsu a few years ago. And so when they come now, they're my friends, and it's just wonderful. That spirit of friendship, and PIRA, the Port Angeles International. Anyway, the PIRA organization. There's MIRA for Mutsu, PIRA for Port Angeles, the International Organization of Friendship that puts these trips together and chaperones the kids and finds them homes like Kate's, and they stay and go to school. They go to school with our kids, and it's affected thousands of lives, and now it's into the second generation. It's just wonderful. So I'm very grateful that I've been part of that, and I hope we can all continue to support that. It's just been marvelous. And one thing, since it's Martin Luther King Jr. birthday, thanks for letting me know. I say publicly for the first time, because I recently remembered this, but I actually marched with Martin Luther King Jr. And now that's something you would look at me and not assume I did. A little girl from Port Angeles, because it was like a kind of a Forrest Gump awkward moment. I was in San Francisco, Easter, 1965, Easter Sunday. My girlfriend and I we were in San Francisco on Nob Hill. We went to, I think it's St. Mary's Big Cathedral Sunday morning to go to Easter service, and we're off to visit some friends. And we went to the 8 o'clock service in this big cathedral. There weren't many people there after the service. We went to leave, and we opened the front door, and there were people lined up for blocks to get in. And I said, well, what's going on? They said, well, Martin Luther King's speaking at the 9 o'clock service. So we just turned around. We were already there and sat there in the second row. I had no idea. We just picked a church. It was close. And anyway, it was just amazing. But that was Easter Sunday. And I was riding with my kids, and I said, I may have marched with Martin Luther. What do you mean you may have? I said, well, if he was speaking Sunday morning, I was in a civil rights march Saturday afternoon through downtown San Francisco. So it was just one of the things. My girlfriends got up, and I was in a dorm with a bunch of girls, and they said, are you going to the march today? It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. It's a beautiful Saturday day. Are you going to the march? I said, well, yeah. So I went down there, and I sang We Shall Overcome. I held hands with very tall black men that I have no idea, but I didn't meet Hosea Williams. I didn't meet Martin Luther King, because they were in front, and we just got in the march and marched and sang, and then we went on about our business, and I was 19, and I forgot about it. But when I mentioned it to my daughter-in-law, she pulled it up, she Googled it, and she pulled up his speech on Easter morning in San Francisco, and I went, I was sitting right there. It was shocking. So life is an adventure, and I appreciate Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday now, because he was an amazing man, and I somehow was in the right place and the right time and actually touched that portion of our history.
And I would also like to thank the students that came and brought that to us, so that was really well done. Again, just a couple of things to report. I met with some of the scientists dealing with climate change. We're looking at some studies that potentially may compare Port Angeles with some of the cities in Florida, and getting them some research and getting us some data for climate action. That's happening. The EDC Gala was very interesting. They had some maritime, some of the new maritime in there. So Director West was there with me. The climate action plan here for Peninsulas is taken up. We're hoping that last day in January, somewhere in there, we're going to hopefully have a meeting. So we'll get a date out to everybody. The ice rink was wonderful. I still have sore ribs out of it because I did fall flat on my face trying to do too many things. But so it's been 6 weeks in recovery. And thank you for the book. We were given this book here, America's Indonesia, right there. So we'll pass this on along to everybody. I'll try to read it and pass it on. Lodging tax, we're going to meet with the county on that and have some more discussion on how to move forward with lodging tax and working together and having that master plan move forward. And besides that, Disability Board met this morning, and all is well, but I'm glad to know that the city is moving forward to try and figure out a way of ensuring that we can be okay in the future for that. The Lords and Trust is also moving forward okay, looking at the electricity of that building, and hopefully, I'm still trying to push to see if we can get a second story up there, because I think it's really important. So I think that
Maybe you can get a tax credit.
That's, well, ideally it would be wonderful. We don't pay tax on that. All right, so I think that is all I've got. So, Mr. West.
Madam Mayor, Council, we do have a number of work sessions that I wanted to mention. Our work session plate is not full yet, but I think part of that is we still need to put together the staff recommended work plan for 2019, and as that fills in and we complete the council calendar for 2019, we'll start to see some of those work session timeframes fill up. But for now, we do have a February 26th work session dedicated to code compliance revenue options. I had mentioned that at our December 18th meeting. And in addition to that, we have one scheduled for May 28th relative to the capital facilities plan. So those are two that you can put on your calendar for now. I did want to mention relative to the public comments we heard earlier this evening. I think it's important that council and members of the public know that staff greatly care about the opinions expressed, and that very much every opinion in this community matters to us. And we're very sorry, and I will say that I am very sorry that people feel that they were either hurt or had pain or that they had disappointment in city staff based on the decision that was made. But know too that I believe strongly that it was the right decision for the long term and the best interest of Port Angeles. It's a decision that I stand by. It was difficult circumstances that we had to implement under, and that was not a good thing, and certainly we didn't appreciate that. But know that for the city, this was not an easy decision. It shouldn't be taken lightly that we just went and carelessly made a decision. We did not. We were diligent about reviewing every study that was put before us. And I think it's important that the community know that we do care. I think too, it's important that now we have a major task before us. And that is demonstrating through action that we have a tree ethic for this community. And obviously that's a big task ahead of us, but that's something that we're going to have to tackle. So council, thank you for your input tonight. Really appreciate the think tank thoughts so that we can put together that legislative briefing paper for your review on February 5th. And that's all that I have.
We have webinars coming up. One is tomorrow morning.
Thank you. We do have a webinar scheduled for tomorrow morning relative to ethics, and then an additional webinar that you see in your packet relative to the Open Public Meetings Act and the Public Records Act.
Thank you. All right, so we are, well, we've got a couple of minutes here. The second public comment period. So does anybody, I see we have some.
Ready? I only have 3 minutes.
Name?
Yeah, John Ralston, city resident. I wanted to wish you a happy first regular meeting of 2019. There were 2 items on the agenda tonight I want to make sure that I somewhat commented about. The first one was E4. You just spent some, wisely spent some money on some lodging tax, event, grant money, etc. I want to remind you, I haven't spoken about it for a couple of years, but you regularly get money from short stay rentals, VRBOs. They're not, there's many of them in the city that maybe they're not supposed to be there. And I've confirmed, maybe 2 years ago, I called and contacted 18 of them, of the estimated 40 by my count. And after 18, I stopped, but all 18 of them were paying tax. And we still need to come back and address VRBOs. The second one was dealing with this, I see here on L1. And then it came up a little bit on your discussions tonight, your meeting with the, was it the Association of Washington Cities, and you're going to have a briefing paper of things of legislative actions. Number 1 priority for me. Chapman, Behringer, and Vanderwijk. Is they don't comply, or they want to argue with whether they need to comply with public disclosure. So they can tell you anything verbally, but their emails and their calendars are not subject to the same regulations that you guys are and you guys are. They're going to tell you that they need exemptions for this or that, or they want special rules. There's nearly 500 exemptions. So for some reason they think they're above the law or beyond the law or should have some different rules. Don't let them tell you that. You have the same rules you guys do. Thank you.
Anybody else who would like to speak to council before we adjourn this meeting? All right. Well, seeing no one, we are adjourned.